You're listening to the Northern Hunter Podcast, home of all things hunting, fishing, and outdoors in Alaska.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, James Payne, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Dalton Gray.
Hello.
And Mariah Humphreys.
Hi there.
How's it going? Man, what a snowstorm we're getting, eh?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
Like,
A lot of wet snow.
this has been probably the bigger part of the snowstorm that we've had this year.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, somewhat. I mean, we
It
had
started snowing this morning by about
Not-
8:30, and it hasn't stopped.
Not necessarily by, like, I guess, inches of snow, but, like,
Mhm.
it is dense out there.
The
man.
den-
Like,
the
the
density
visibility
is coming
is
down.
horrible.
Yeah.
right
And it's really, really slick snow, too.
Yeah.
The
Well, that's
roads are
'cause it's
bad.
like 30 degrees and hot out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
on the drive out here to the studio, there was a couple of cars off the highway there.
Oh,
did
yeah.
you see them? Or?
Oh, yeah, I sure
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
You
there's always cars on the side of that highway.
Yeah.
You ever wonder how, this is like, people have been driving in snow. It's been snowing all winter long.
Mhm.
But then,
Well, but this is especially slippery right now. It's warm.
True.
Well-
even when I went to slow down when I saw traffic was backed up, I was starting to slow down well ahead of time because
course.
that's what you do.
right.
And I started to slip a little bit. You
Well,
know?
and the bigger problem too is when it cools down to like negative 20 and then warms up to 30.
You
and
mean
then it's
20
kind of been
below?
20 below zero. Yeah,
Negative
Yeah,
20.
yeah.
He
That's
said
negative
negative
20.
20.
That's what I said.
No, it's
But-
not negative 20. It's 20 below.
It's negative 20.
it's negative 20.
No, it's not.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah,
But
whatever.
anyway, it's you get like, I don't know. I've just noticed it gets particularly worse when we're having those influxes like that. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
man, and in front of the studio, it's easy slick out there.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
That's
like
because
every
yeah.
time.
there's so many driveways and pullouts and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Exactly.
anyway, enough about the weather, guys. Hopefully you are as excited for this episode as we are. This is going to be about more cartridges and more hunting, but we're going to switch it up a little bit from our normal
yeah.
discussions. Typically, we've been talking about, more specifically bears and things like that. We're going to be going over the more common cartridges and the smaller options and how to properly use them and
Yes.
figure out exactly what you need for what you're trying to do. Like if you're not going after like coastal browns or anything else we've really talked about in the show.
Right.
So before we get into that though, I wanted to make an announcement on more of a plug than anything else.
Da-da-da-da.
So we've talked about different banquets on the show before and then kind of encourage people to participate. They call it the 2023 Trappers Fling, and that is put on by the Alaska Trappers Association. That's going to be here in Fairbanks at the Westmark Gold Room on March 28th
Nice.
this year. So looks like the cost of entry is $50. If you've been to these kind of things before, typically there's a dinner, there's raffles, there's auctions, there's speakers, things like that. It's a good chance to
Uh-huh.
meet people, maybe get some new gear at a discounted rate. I think I want to say they're putting in a raffle for a Arctic Oven hot tent.
Oh,
So,
nice.
Yeah, with like a
Nice.
limited amount of tickets and all that. So
Nice.
you can go online, go to alaskatrappers.org, and you can order your tickets there. And when you go to these things, I mean, they really support these local groups that do a lot for the hunting community and the trapping community and whatnot.
Mhm.
These guys are largely volunteer based groups, and these kind of winter is kind of like the fundraising season.
Are they
going
going to be selling any hides at this
So
banquet?
it looks like there is a raw fur auction that's going on. Viewing begins at 10 a.m. Sales begin both days at 11, and that's on Saturday and Sunday, so March 18th and 19th.
So this is not part of the banquet.
It's not part of the banquet, no, but it's put
Okay.
on by the same people.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and that is at the Dog Mushers Hall off Farmers Loop Road. I believe they have it there every year. It's kind of there's a dog sled race that goes on around the same time. It's put on. It's the Open North American Dog Race.
Yep.
And it's just a little local dog race. It's they kind of go around the loop there in Kramer's Field area.
Yeah.
Kind of between Farmers Loop and College Road. And it's really cool if you're in Fairbanks and you want to see a dog race. It's a really awesome event. Actually, they have you can go there, and it's not some long drawn out event. And you can see him leave, and you can see him come back in the
And
same
I'm
day.
sure you clarify that this is not like a dog race, like a,
It is a dog sled race.
Right.
So people on sleds being pulled by dogs. If you don't,
Yeah.
if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sorry, you live in a box. But it's,
Google dog sled.
Yeah.
We're not
But
talking about like dog fights.
No, this is not. It's not the dogs race. I mean, it is the dogs racing, but it's this is not like a greyhound race. This is a people race, but just being pulled by dogs. But it's a good time. They've got a whole. Usually, there's like a tent of vendors there.
Yeah.
They'll have local vendors with different art and different things like that. So you
Do they
can
have
really
like
go
a food
out.
truck there, or is there?
Usually several.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay.
Yeah. And then I think inside the Mushers Hall, they normally do concessions, and you can go in there to warm up and everything like that.
Okay.
Which this is looking. I mean, it's turning out to be a
Not that
pretty
it's going to
good.
be a cold race. I mean, if these temperatures continue.
I was just going to say it's turning out to be a nice March for us. So it might not be a bad time to be out there. Anyways, I actually used to help out with that race.
Oh, did you?
Back in the day, I was a sled holder. So I would be there, and these dogs have a lot of power. You know? I mean, it's funny when you look at them, especially from an outsider's perspective. I mean, I've been here since 2009, but growing up, you watch Balto, and you think of Malamutes and things like that.
Oh,
pulling these
really?
sleds, yeah.
Okay.
And
I
it's like
out on that.
And you see these dogs, and they're these tiny little things, and they're skinny, and but they have some power, man.
They are.
So when they're lined up, they come up to the starting line one at a time, and because it's a timed race, they're not actually like all at the starting line. It's not NASCAR,
Right?
But and so they usually have at any given time, depending on how many dogs are on the team, 2 to 4 to 6 of us holding the sled, so they don't power past the starting line, because these dogs are waiting to go.
Yeah.
And but it's a great time. So
that sounds like fun.
So you can go there, watch some dog races, buy some fur.
I'm definitely interested in going to the banquet with the Trappers Association, just to go see what that's all about. I've never trapped myself. I should clarify, not trapped myself, but I have never trapped personally. But at some point, I would love to get into it. I think it's becoming less and less common, just because of the price that
it really is.
The cost of entry is a lot higher than it ever has been.
Yeah. And arguably, trying to get into it is getting harder, not only because of that, but because a lot of the access to trapping areas is kind of already taken by people that are already in it. And so, I can't tell you how many trails I've been to where I'm thinking in my head, oh, this would be a great trap line. And then you see a sign,
trap line,
a registered trap line. And so it's like, oh, well, somebody else had the same idea just before me. And that could be hard, but I mean, it's not like there's not places you can go. There's plenty of them. You just got to be a little bit more creative and find them. But that is one big thing that the Trappers Association, works on is, not just, helping existing trappers, but also trying to educate, new trappers, trying to bring more people into it.
They have the Alaska Trappers Association magazine that you can get.
Yeah.
It's actually really good.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I actually looked at that. There was someone in a guide camp that I worked in last year that trapped regularly, and they actually had an article in the magazine.
Oh, nice!
They had it out there at camp, and I read through it. It's actually a very good magazine.
It is very good.
I enjoyed reading that.
Ones available today.
Yeah.
Have you ever did you ever do any muskrat trapping or anything with me?
You know what? I did with you that one time. Okay. Probably, what was that? 4 years ago now. If not 5 or 6, but that's right. We went out there in March,
in the spring.
March. It would have been. Yeah. I think we got like 60 rats.
We get a lot sometimes,
if not more. Yeah. We caught a pile of them. That was fun.
That's absolutely
nice and warm. The lake didn't have any overflow that year. It was super easy going, and it was just ride around and keep doing the loop and rat after rat after rat. It was a blast.
That sounds like a blast.
That's exciting stuff.
Yeah, the other announcement I had that I just wanted to touch on before we get into it is to kind of explain the regulation process, because there's an upcoming deadline that I think people need to know about. So for those of you that don't know, the game regs are not some arbitrary rule system that is just made up out of thin air. There's actually a process that allows the people that hunt these areas, and you can break it down into your specific unit or regs that you want to see done throughout the state. But there's a way for people to apply for these or to submit proposals for changes. So if you see something that you think is wrong, that you want more restrictions on, or maybe they have restrictions that don't make sense and you want those lifted, or you want to extend a certain area, let's say any kind of regulation you could want to change.
Right.
the process for that is there's a committee called the Advisory Committee to Fish and Game, and that is a group comprised of. I think I've spoken about them before on the show, but that's a group comprised of local hunters and local people that just have a huge passion for the outdoors, and they get together, and it's a voluntary basis thing, but they represent a local community's hunting group to the Fish and Game, the Board of Game.
Yeah, so that the hunters get a voice.
Right, and every community, I don't know if every community has one, but majority of communities have one.
Yeah.
And so the Fairbanks area has one, and they what happens is when you want to make a change to the regulations, you would submit a proposal, and you can basically lobby for the AC's support. Yeah. And so the AC, as the designated representatives for the hunting community, have to vote on it and support it, and then they present it to the Board of Fish and Game. Yeah. And then, of course, the process goes on from there, and whether or not the Board of Fish and Game approves it or not. But so for those of you that didn't know you had a voice, you do. And they are having a Game and Trap subcommittee meeting at the Fish and Game building here in Fairbanks off College Road on the 28th of this month.
And do you have to be on the board to attend?
So all of these meetings are open to the public. They have I believe it's a Zoom option that you can get into remotely. And people do get involved that way. You're still able to make comments. You're still able to interact with the meeting, even remotely. Yeah. If you're not wanting to be there in person or able to be there in person. Yeah. But any of these meetings, I mean, you can show up in person and make your case and everything like that. And so if you have anything you want to, bring up and lobby for approval and see kind of how the community feels about it and how these community leaders are whether they agree with you and they want to push this up the chain. Yeah. Show up on the 28th. And like I said, it's at the Fish and Game building, and they love hearing from people because that's exactly what their whole purpose is. Yeah. And I go to these meetings and there's not a whole lot of participation, like for what you would think, for how big of a hunting community this is. And
this is the 28th of this month
of March. Yeah. It's a Wednesday. So I want to say it starts at 6. So
PM?
PM. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'll be in attendance.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's a great way to get involved and to really, it's kind of like voting, like if you got to be involved in order to, if you want actual change to happen. Right. So, that's a really big.
Yeah. So, well, that's great. Yeah. That's really important. I have a few pet peeves that we've talked about off the air that we will talk about after the meeting and see where they go.
Yeah, exactly.
Some things that we all in this room feel pretty strongly about that need to be changed and updated. Yeah. And we've mentioned a few of them on the show before, so I won't go into too much detail. Yeah. But it's a great opportunity, and like you said, it gives the people a voice. It gives the hunting community a way to have some input into this process, and I think that's great that they take public opinion like that. Yeah. So hopefully we can see a few things changed.
Yeah. The other great thing about this system is that you get to learn a ton. Yeah. Just sitting in the meetings or just listening in on the Zoom.
And do they have biologists present too?
Oh yeah. There's wildlife troopers and biologists and Fish and Game reps. I mean, it is a very involved process. You get to hear from and talk to a lot of people. Okay. And one of the cool things that they were updating us with this month is the wood bison project. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, Alaska is actively trying to reintroduce the wood bison as a viable species here in Alaska.
To which area?
So that's kind of one of the big processes with the update is they're struggling to find areas. They're not find areas. They've found a bunch of areas, but they're struggling to get the permissions or the local community support to release wood bison into the area.
No.
Right now, the primary one that they have here that they were talking about is off the Anoka River.
Okay.
It's kind of over there by Holy Cross. Yeah. And I believe there's 2. Let me look through this real quick.
Which is right near the Yukon River.
It is. Yep. Yeah. And there's 3 other areas that they're looking at going to right now. And that is the lower Tanana drainage, the upper Tanana drainage, and the Yukon Flats. Okay. Those are 3 areas they're looking at releasing bison to right now.
Now, quick side question.
Yeah.
Didn't they release bison into an area out west, north of town, over near Minto area?
No. So they were talking about it. So the Minto Flats is a big one that they've been trying to get support for. And I want to say that's the next one they're pushing for.
Okay.
Because the Minto Flats area
So they're trying for multiple reintroductions.
Oh,
then.
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So bison used to roam the entire state.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they're trying to do is they're doing these pockets right now. And they're just trying to get, they have to get local community support before they can do that, obviously. And, so they're just kind of figuring out where the good habitat is and then trying to, get that support, whether that's from, the local communities themselves or, native corporations.
So when you say support, you mean just them to say, yes, we will allow you to do this?
Yeah, they have to approve it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they come up, so Fish and Game has to get the approval to put them there, and then they can come up with a management plan, and then the management plan dictates exactly how it goes.
How many are they trying to put in this next one?
It doesn't say exactly how many they're planning on putting at each one necessarily. I know that the number 8 years ago, and this is actually the more important part. 8 years ago, I think they released 120 into that Innoko River area.
Whoa.
And then
That's a lot.
the way that they do it is actually really cool.
So there are already wood bison there.
Yes, that one is an active reintroduction process.
Oh, okay.
And so
they're trying to put more in there.
They've already put, not necessarily there. I mean, they are, but they already have the approval to put more there, basically.
Okay.
The ones that they're looking for approval on is the new areas, where there's not already bison.
Okay.
Like the Yukon Flats and Minto Flats. And
is there a management hunting opportunity for that Innoko herd yet?
No, there's no hunting opportunity yet. There is an update. So let's see. So they did a count this year. The herd is up to 150 in count now. And the cool part, and this was the part I found was awesome about the update, was that out of 26 calves, they actually counted all 26 during these winter counts.
Wow.
No kidding.
So they have had a 100% success rate with calf survival.
Wow.
So that, and I mean, that makes sense when you look at the bison. I mean, bison historically are very, protect herd animals. And so it's,
right.
It's really awesome to see that they're doing good there. The number of total animals right now is actually lower than the total number of animals that they released. But he kind of explained that in the meeting the other night, where he was saying that initially, because these animals are reintroduced, I believe they get most of them from Canada. There's an agreement between us and Canada where we get kind of their surplus bison from their herds. And wherever they were from, they had a bunch of issues with the local area, like falling through ice in the river and things like that. So there was during the initial process. I mean, this process is only 8 years old, and so there was an adjustment period there where they would lose some to either new predators that they weren't used to, or environmental things like that. But for the most part, they've actually done really well. They've been bouncing back and coming back, and I'm really excited for this because it won't be anytime soon. But a big purpose for this is to create a huntable surplus of animals.
Right.
They were doing. They had talked about the muskox that came back, up in the northern region. And, they were able to actually hand out tags for that for the first time in, I want to say 17 years or something like that. Yeah. And that's awesome. Right. It is awesome to see them, kind of bring these species or these herds back, the places where they had to shut down hunting just because, the herd pressure was too much.
Right.
And so that is the plan with these. There's absolutely no timeline on when that's going to happen. Yeah. Obviously everything's up in the air. Right. If they get the approvals, if they're able to release the amount they want, if they have the survival rate that they want. Yeah. There's so many variables. Yeah. But they're working towards it. And that's what I'm excited for. That's what I think is really awesome, is to bring a new opportunity to hunting in Alaska. Right now everybody's fighting over the same 3 bison tags. Yeah. It's like, right. I mean, you get how many tens of thousands of people apply for the Delta, for 30 permits.
You've got Delta, Farewell, and Delta, Farewell, and the Chitna herd.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that's it.
And this year in Delta, they had to drop it down to 30 permits. And so it's, I think it was like 30,000 people applied for 30 permits.
30,000?
I think it was somewhere around there. I have to look again.
Whoa.
But it's in the tens of thousands.
It's kind of like the Alaska raffle.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, your chances are far less than 1% to draw that tag.
Oh, yeah.
So,
but it's worth every penny to put in for it every year.
Oh, yeah.
Just for the meat.
I mean, it costs, $30 for 6 applications?
Right.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, it goes to conservation. So, you win either way.
Right.
Exactly.
But
Well, that's very interesting. Very, very interesting.
But it's really cool to see the state doing that.
I'm curious. So are these wild bison from Canada or
they
ranched?
Are. No, they're wild.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Now, they do spend time in captivity during the transition so that they have...
Probably to make sure that they're not bringing in some kind of weird disease.
Well, all of that, but to include, just timing the releases. They don't want to release too many at one time. And there's a method to it where you don't want to shock it.
And then it hits 40 below and they all freeze to death.
There's the what's that called up off what road is that?
I don't know.
It's the Large Animal Research Center for UAF. It's off of it's right there off of
yeah.
I totally forget.
It's like a Russian name or something for the road, but I don't remember it right now. Yankovich.
That's right.
Yeah, it's off Yankovich. You can actually go see the animals there. It's really cool. But there's just a little pull off, and you can actually view them in their enclosures. But they have one there, so they have...
That is a non-hunting area.
Until the apocalypse happens. But
if that happens, we live too far away to get there first.
Right.
Everybody on Yankovich is set.
Roads closed. But so they said there's like 10 or 15 there, and then there's a bunch in Anchorage as well that are getting staged up to go out. So
okay. Interesting.
It's a really cool process. It's a really cool just thing that they're doing, and I full-heartedly support it. If you want to have more or find more information on that, you can go to alaskawildlife.org /about/wood bison restoration. And that's got a whole list. I believe it even lays down all of the different process that they've made from, back in the 50s when the numbers started to plummet and they basically went away to like 2003, 2008, 2014. They've got updates on everything that they've been doing. So it's pretty neat.
Cool.
But yeah. So did you guys have anything?
I don't think there was.
I had something I wanted to bring up today, but I totally forgot by the time we got the podcast time. So
that same thing happened to me.
It's going to have to wait until next episode.
Right on.
If you can figure it out.
Yeah, if I can ever remember it. It must have been important. All right, folks, I want to take a second to tell you about a product I found this last year and have absolutely fallen in love with. It's the Stealthy Hunter rifle cover. I used one on a recent black-tailed deer hunt in southeast Alaska, and it did a great job of keeping the saltwater and debris out of the action and also protecting the scope on my rifle from getting knocked around and damaged. On top of all that, the carry handle made it easy to transport the rifle to and from the boat during the hunt. When it got wet from rain and ocean spray, I hung it up at camp to dry at night, and it was always dry in 20 minutes or less. Stealthy Hunter also offers a wide variety of nutritional supplements for the outdoorsman, such as CBD oils, essential vitamins, turmeric, and bone broth. In the gear shop, they also have a lightweight first aid kit, glassing pads, and stuff sacks to organize your gear and your pack. Go check out Stealthy Hunter's website and use the code TheNorthernHunter at checkout to get a discount on your order today. All Stealthy Hunter equipment is proudly made in the USA.
I guess we will just dive right into the calibers.
Yeah.
So
this was kind of prompted by a listener that I spoke with about the previous several shows that we've been talking about, and we have mentioned a great deal about medium bore cartridges.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of 338s, 375s, and so on and so forth, and how much we all have a soft spot in our hearts for those larger calibers. For all around hunting, yes, but specifically for coastal brown bear hunting, and how important it is to treat them like dangerous game animals, and we have talked about that in great extent. So this individual said that he thought that it would be a good idea because so much of Alaska doesn't. So many Alaskan hunters and even non-residents that come up don't bring a 338 or a 375, and how. We all know that's perfectly fine. We just haven't really mentioned that all that much.
Yeah.
So he mentioned that he thought it would be a good idea and kind of a prudent thing to do to take some time and talk about more commonly used cartridges and how those are perfectly acceptable for probably 99% of situations that you're going to run into. So that's kind of what we're going to do here today.
And it really is I mean, the fact of the matter is that a lot of guys that come up from the lower 48 and a lot of people that live up here in general, I mean, they might not be going after coastal grizzlies. Yeah. You know, they might just be going after their yearly moose.
We all know folks here in Fairbanks that are never going to travel to the coast to hunt big brown bears. They're perfectly happy with a rifle that'll just kill what they want to kill in the interior, and that's perfectly acceptable. So, but I was going to preface this by saying everything we talk about here today, take it and apply it to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we hope that you learn something from what we're going to talk about.
Right.
Yeah. But the biggest point that I want to stress is that the rifle that you need to bring on your hunt in Alaska needs to be, above all else, one that you shoot well.
Yes.
And we talked a lot about 375s and 4570s and bear stopper guns with our listener question in the last episode about going to Kodiak. And he mentioned that he had a 7mm. And we mentioned that a little bit in that episode about bringing the gun that you shoot comfortably.
Yeah.
And we recommended a more powerful stopping round for that. But it doesn't matter if you have the greatest killing rifle in the world if you can't shoot it well.
Yep.
So these calibers that we're going to talk about today, these cartridges are much more shootable for the average hunter than a larger caliber rifle like a 375 or even a 338.
Yeah.
So these are rifles that I see a lot more commonly in guide camps in the interior that clients bring up because most non-residents are only going to have 1 or 2 trips in their lifetime to Alaska on a guided hunt. And so why would they go drop a couple $1,000 on a brand new, 375 that they're only ever going to use on one hunt? And they're likely not going to shoot it very much. They're not going to be very proficient with it. So we're going to talk about cartridges that you probably already own or that are much more attainable and affordable to get and feed and shoot well and learn and be proficient with.
Well, and one thing that I want to plug in too is that, I want to talk about, how to compare cartridges and how to judge your cartridges performance, because for you guys listen, the ones we are going to specifically mention here and talk about, this is not an all-inclusive list. It's not meant to be an all-inclusive list, but hopefully you'll get the tools to judge whether what you have that we didn't mention kind of meets up with what we're talking about and meets the requirements for what you're going after. Is it enough to bring on your guided moose hunt or, your DIY moose hunt, you know, or, is it more of a deer round, kind of thing. So
the ones that we're going to talk about are all going to be very commonly available mainstream cartridges.
Yep. So why don't we kick that off with the OG, the old 30-06.
Yes.
I love the 30-06.
So do I.
I don't think anybody should dislike the 30-06.
Yep. The 30-06 is just, honestly, it is probably I'm not going to say, well, I could say probably one of the most universal rounds ever
absolutely.
made. Yeah. From the ability to shoot super light, pert near varmint rounds out of it to super heavy 220 grain bear rounds. Yeah. You can set up a 30-06 to do just about anything within its its wheelhouse.
Well, since we're on the 30-06, and we may not be able to do this for every caliber, but James, I'm pretty sure Dalton knows the answer to this question. But James, what does the 30-06 stand for?
30 caliber, made in 1906.
Good job.
Correct. That was a government name issued from the U.S. government for the U.S. military adaptation of the 30 caliber, and it was introduced in 1906.
Yep.
Right. So, okay. Well, that's some.
I'm a little offended. You thought I wouldn't know the answer to that.
I didn't say you wouldn't know. I just knew he did. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. It was a good way to give that factoid to the listeners.
It was very good.
The 30-06 has been used by a whole lot of people in Alaska and still is being used, and probably has taken more game in Alaska than any other 3 cartridges combined.
Oh yeah, arguably, yeah.
And I haven't thought about it that way, but that's probably true.
They have taken tens of thousands of game animals in Alaska and around the world for that matter.
Now, the big benefit to this cartridge, like I said, is not just that the projectile difference is so massive, so you can kind of cater it to whatever you want. But I'm pretty sure, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say something that I think every single rifle manufacturer makes a 30-06. I'm pretty sure, unless you go with like the custom, like super long range, people. But I'm talking like Ruger. I guess Weatherby probably wouldn't make a.
No, they do.
Do they make a
30-06?
Yeah. Do they? Yeah. Okay, cool. Good for them.
Yeah.
Makes them
I
better
saw
all-American
some
company if they do that.
I was walking through. I think it was in a different caliber. Never mind.
I was going to read a quick quote from an article here. It's actually from an Outdoor Life article. It was published by John Snow. And there's a quote from an Alaskan bear guide, is all it says. It says, and in quoting, anyone who says the 30-06 is not effective on brown bears or grizzlies has either never used one or is unwittingly commenting on their marksmanship. The point there is that if you don't think a 30-06 is enough gusto to kill a big bear, then you're just not doing it right.
Right.
It kind of comes back to what you were saying about a gun you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, and that's kind of the great thing about a 30-06 is, it does have plenty of killing power for anything you're going to go after. I mean, you can chase everything from big bears to, you could take it out sheep hunting if you really wanted to. If you found one in the right platform that was, appropriate for that. You can take moose with it. You can take, anything with it.
Deer, wolves,
wolves, anything. Now, I mean, your ranges aren't going to be what they would be with, other cartridges, but you're going to have plenty of range for the average hunter. It will outshoot most people. Right. It will outrange most people. Yeah. And go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say on that note, the average factory velocity for a 180 grain bullet out of an .06 is about 2,700 to 2,750 feet per second.
Yeah.
That is the average, baseline velocity for a 180. And I would think that the 180 and the 165 is the two most common bullet weights found in the .06.
Yeah,
probably.
150s are more common, like for deer hunting and whatnot.
I've seen a lot of 150s in the stores recently, but I think that's just because of the shortages.
Everybody buys the 180s as soon as they get on the shelves.
Right.
When 30-06 was on the shelves, there were a lot of 220s as well.
Not a lot, no.
Not a lot?
Yeah. No, I don't believe that any factory loadings are offered in 200s or 220s, with the exception of the 200 grain trophy bonded bear claw from Federal, which is a really, really great bullet if you're going to shoot a 06 for brown bears.
Yep.
And then Federal offers in their Power Shock, I believe, a 220 grain round nose lead core projectile. And that's a pretty soft bullet, but again, you're just carrying like a big heavy slug. And then also the Remington Core Lock comes in a 220 grain as well.
I used to shoot those. So
and that would be a phenomenal bait bullet, dude.
Oh yeah.
Like,
and obviously you're sacrificing velocity, but like you said, for up close inside 200 yards, that's a great round.
Yep. Yeah. And honestly, that's what my wife hunts with. That's what she has is a good old 30-06, and I think it's for her application. Which is really kind of why we're doing this, is because we talk about the big bullets and the Magnum calibers and everything like that we use, but that's because that fits our style, our needs. But for her needs, she doesn't want to shoot past 400 yards or 300 yards. She's not trying to extend that range out. If the animal's that far away, it won.
Yeah.
And that's her mentality. And that's great. I feel great about that. Yeah. But the reason I'm so comfortable with her is because just the 30-06 can do it all, man. Yeah. And
my wife also has, I upgraded her rifle this last year. We bought a Sacco 85 Finlight in 30-06, and she shoots a 30-06 really well. She's not as comfortable with recoil as I am by any means, or any of us for that matter.
Right.
Most women are more recoil sensitive. Being smaller than men for the most part.
Well, it depends on the man.
Depends on the woman.
That is largely up for discussion.
Touche. Yeah. Oh, I see what you did there. Yeah. Anyway, she shoots a 06, and that Finlight Sacco. Yeah, I almost said Sacco.
Dalton, question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you gonna go wolf hunting? You gonna go wolf hunting with that Sacco?
No, I'm either gonna go wolf hunting with my Seiko, or I'm gonna go wolf hunting with my Sacco.
All right,
you guys got to give some background to that.
They listen to the podcast. I mean, come
they're
on.
not going to get the inside joke.
Yeah, well, all right, I'll give it some backstory. I've been giving Mariah a ration of criticism for saying woof instead of wolf, and it's just how he grew up saying it. His dad says it the same way.
Yep.
And so I always give him a hard time for saying woof. And someone wrote into the podcast and told Mariah, said, don't let him give you a hard time for saying woof. He says Seiko when it's pronounced Sacco.
Yeah.
Which I already knew that, but people look at you weird, or at least I've had people look at me weird when I say Sacco because they don't know what in the world that is, but they know what Seiko is because that's the American pronunciation.
Since we're talking about the 30-06, it's like saying the M1 Garand.
Yeah, instead of Garand. Yeah.
Which John Garand.
Yes. He pronounced his own name as Garand. So yeah. Anyway, though, so my wife shoots an 06, and your wife shoots an 06, and a lot of the shootability of the 06 comes from the fact that it has relatively low recoil for what you're being able to do. I want to
say it's only 20 pounds of free recoil.
I think the number coming to my mind was 22, but somewhere between 20 and 23
it would depend
pounds.
on your rifle and what bullet you're shooting.
Rifle weight and how heavy the bullet is and how fast you're trying to push it. That all comes into recoil. But, that
compared to a 300 Win Mag that comes in around 34, 35 foot-pounds.
Is it? No, I don't think the 300 Win Mag is over 30.
Is it that hot?
It's that hot.
I thought it was like 28.
28? No, it's in the 30s somewhere.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I haven't looked at that in a while. You can look that up and correct me if I'm wrong. I think Chuck Hawks has
that's the site I'm going to right now.
Has a recoil chart.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, RMEF has, just if you Google search 300 Win Mag recoil.
Wow. It is lower than I thought.
Yeah, the RMEF says...
Yeah, 26.2, 28.3.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're shooting a light rifle with a 200 grain bullet hand-loaded, you could probably hit 30 or more.
Yep,
Anyway, so that the .06 gives adequate performance, and with a 180 grain conventional style bullet, you're easily killing out to 400 yards. Easily. And then the factory load of Hornady with a 178 grain ELDX with a much higher ballistic coefficient, being much more efficient going through the air, it retains its velocity better.
Yep.
And that one you can probably stretch out over 500 yards, I'm sure. But that's obviously a softer bullet. That would be a great round for like caribou or sheep or deer, things like that.
Yeah.
So
no, that's and that's the wonderful thing about just being able to get out there with a rifle like this. I think all three of us. Did we all start with 30-06s?
I did.
Yeah.
Basically,
okay,
I did. I shot my first bear with the 30-30, but
first rifle I ever bought was a Tikka in a 30-06, and I shot several animals with it. And it works great.
Yeah, I've killed a couple caribou with a 30-06.
Yeah, I'm saying it works phenomenally. I mean, for when you use the cartridge for the purpose it's intended within and the restrictions of the cartridge,
right?
Up close like that, it'll do everything it's designed to do.
I had a buddy I was hunting with one time that was he was shooting a 308. It was a Kimber. What was that thing?
Who?
Yeah.
Yes, that was a Kimber. It was more of a bench model. It was it was like a tactical adaptation.
It was a very heavy rifle.
Yeah.
We were on the 40-mile hunt, and he shot a caribou, and the herd separated from it. It was hit, but he shot it. And he shot it again, and he looks at his rifle and says, "What in the world?" So I look at the caribou, which is still standing there, and I shoot it.
Mm-hmm.
With your 30-06.
With my 30-06. It flipped over from the, and I think I was shooting like at least 180s, if not the 220s at that point, because I had no idea like what my bullets were doing. I looked at the chart in the box and said, "Okay, at 200 yards, it need to hold this high."
Right. Good old Kentucky windage.
Yep.
Yeah.
But so let's jump from the 06 to what it parented next a little bit. A few years later, somebody necked the 30-06 case down to .27 caliber,
giving birth to
the 270 Winchester.
Exactly.
And that round, obviously, it's a different bore diameter. It's a lot smaller, and it fires. The original loading was. The goal was to get 3,000 feet per second, if I'm not mistaken. And they achieved that with a 130 grain bullet. And so that was, at the time, I believe it was one of the faster cartridges on the market.
It was,
and that made it really desirable for like mountain hunters, targeting high mountain mule deer or sheep.
Yeah.
A lot of guys found it every bit as effective on anything except for the biggest of animals, as a 0.6 was.
It was mostly used, in the areas of the country where you didn't necessarily have to worry about those big predators coming after you.
Well,
that being said,
and let's remember that these are the days pre-rangefinder.
Right.
So a flatter trajectory meant you had a better chance of having like a 300-yard zero.
Right.
And you didn't have to do as much holdover.
Yeah.
So you could shoot a flatter round and have 400-yard plus shots and have a much better chance of hitting your animal.
Yeah, your point blank range would have been much more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And but even with, it being a smaller bullet and a smaller, but moving a little bit faster, it has served a ton of people well in the state of Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Arguably speaking, you could say that, alongside the 30-06, one of the most common used rifles or cartridges in Alaska, or in Alaska's history for hunting, whether it be for, sport or subsistence or any of that, is the 270 Winchester. Yeah. Everybody has a story about the old man they know that shot the 270.
My good guiding buddy, Remy, his dad has hunted with a 270 for decades.
Yep.
And he just shot another bull moose a few weeks ago on a winter hunt on Snow Machine. Just shot another one a couple weeks ago with his 270. I wouldn't even know how many animals he's killed with that gun. But grizzly bears, moose, caribou, you name it, he shot it. And I don't think he'll ever change from a 270. I think if we told him, hey, we're going to take you on a coastal brown bear hunt, he would probably want to bring his 270 just because that's what he knows. That's what he's familiar with.
And I know all kinds of guys like that, no matter what they're going after, they're just going to use what they're comfortable with.
On that note, there's another good friend of mine that lives down in Southeast where I deer hunt for the last 7 years. And he shoots a 270, or at least has up until this point. And this year he actually upgraded to a 300 short mag. He wanted something a little bit bigger, but he's shot a 270 for years, and he killed his first moose with a 270.
Yeah.
He shot it with a 150 grain Nosler partition at 275 yards, quartering away.
Yeah.
And it had a complete pass through. And then a week after that happened, this was a few years ago. Another individual that I know that I won't name was moose hunting not too far out of the Fairbanks area.
Mm-hmm.
And he shot a moose with a 270, and his was the polar opposite. It was like 35 yards away, facing him. And the only shot he had was a frontal shot.
Yeah.
And he shot it right in the middle of the chest, right in between the shoulders, right at the bottom where the neck goes into the chest cavity. And complete pass through came out the ribs. I think towards the back of the ribs it went out.
Okay.
A little bit of an angle.
Yep.
And I believe, if I get the story straight, when he came out of the recoil, the moose was laying on the ground and never even twitched.
I love when that happens.
And again, that was another 150 grain Nosler partition. So shooting a little bit heavier, like a 150 grain out of a 270, still getting pretty good velocity.
Well,
and that 150 has a lot better sectional density than a 130 grain bullet does. So you get a lot better penetration out of it. And that round works awesome.
Yeah. Well, and the thing to think about too is that the limitations of these kinds of cartridges are not, like I said before, they're still well beyond the scope of most average hunters.
Absolutely.
And especially if you're not using, high tech glass and you're not, utilizing, your dope and your, dialing your scope and all of that jazz. These things will still reach farther than you're probably willing to shoot.
Right.
I didn't mention it, or we kind of moved on to this one before I got a chance to mention it, but I load 180 grain Nosler AccuBonds into my wife's .6.
Yeah.
And those things they don't reach the 1800 feet per second limit until after 525 yards.
Which is minimum expansion velocity.
Minimum expansion for that bullet.
Yeah.
And so, but it's somewhere between, I have it set to 25 yard increments. So it's somewhere between 525 and 550 is where you actually stop, that bullet reaches that 1800 feet per second mark.
And I would venture to say that probably over 85% of hunters in Alaska will never shoot an animal past probably 350.
Now the 270 here I'm just looking at the load data for 140 grain AccuBond out of that.
Which would be a great load, by the way.
Which would be a phenomenal load. And that reaches 1,800 feet per second at 525. So that is still over 500 yards.
Yeah.
You know, so
plenty capable.
Yeah.
Plenty.
So don't let anybody tell you that you can't, you know, shoot a moose at 300 yards, you know, with your existing setup if you have a 270. It'll work perfectly fine as long as you shoot the right bullet, and we'll go into that later. But, you know, it's a great cartridge that has served a lot of people well in Alaska. So
let's jump to the next one, which is another wildly popular one, at least in the last 30 or 40 years anyway.
Oh, this one.
Is the 308, the 308 Winchester.
Oh, yeah.
And that was developed as now. Well, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I don't exactly remember right now. Was that developed specifically for military purposes to give them a shorter action rifle?
I actually don't know that.
I don't know that
either.
My head. Man, the three of us, we don't know that.
It sounded.
I don't
right.
shoot 308, so
like I've heard that before.
Me either, but still, it's a very popular cartridge.
While you guys are looking that up, I'll just kind of give a brief summary of what it is. A 308 is a very much it's a short action cartridge, so it's a much shorter case length than a 30-06 is, which is a standard long action round. Okay, so the 308 can shoot all of the lighter bullets that a 06 can, and generally up to a 180. You won't find a 308 factory load anyway that's over a 180 that I'm aware of, unless there's some kind of a match offering for like a 190. But the majority of 308s factory loads are going to be 150s and 165s, and that is because of a reduced case capacity, so that you're not going to get as good a velocity as a 06.
So the 308 Winchester is the civilian version of the 7.62 by 51 NATO.
Okay, so which one came first?
Yep. So the 751 or 7.62. Let's see, that was
that in the
1952. 50s? Is that what this is
saying? That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, 1952. And then I think, but anyway, shortly thereafter, the 308 came to par. Let me verify this real quick. But anyway, continue what you were saying.
It was 1954 that the 7.62 by 51.
Okay, that's.
And then it says, and then Winchester branded the cartridge and introduced it to the commercial hunting market as a 308 Winchester.
Mm-hmm.
So it was right after that, right at the same time, it looks like.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. I couldn't find a differing date. Yeah, so it probably was.
So very
right
similar to like the 7.6, or I'm sorry.
It's like the 223 versus the 5.56.
Yes.
It's literally the same thing. Yeah,
exactly. So the 308, if you were to look at side-by-side ballistics, go ahead and find out what a 308 shooting a 180 velocity is like, because I know we mentioned 27 to 2750 for an 06.
2510 on a 180.
On a 185.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're looking at 2550 max with a 180. Mm-hmm. And that's why most of the 308 hunting offerings are in 165s and 150s.
I was just going to say, in factory loads, you're not really going to find the 180 or heavier loads.
Exactly.
You're going to see more of the 150s, the 168s, the 175s.
Right.
Would probably be the highest. But that's going to be mostly match grade bullets there.
Right.
So the 165 partition is going 2,800 feet per second.
Okay.
So.
Right. So with a 165, you're getting 180 velocity that you would have in a 06, basically, at least close to it. Because with a 165 out of a 06, you're going to be able to get over that over 2850 or even closer to 2900.
Let's just go with the 150 grain AccuBond here. That's traveling at 2875.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that crosses the 1800 feet per second mark right around 450 yards.
Right. So,
and I'm just using that as an example because 1800 feet per second is a very standard expansion rate. So
the best way that I picture a 308 is a 30-06 minus 200 feet a second of muzzle velocity. That's in the general area of what you're going to be looking at.
Yeah.
Now, again, what we mentioned
with
about
the benefit of being a short action though for people that want
it is a shorter action.
Yeah.
It is going to make it a little bit lighter of a gun if you're an ounce counter.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you're not going to be shooting long shots, over 350 or 400, then it's a perfectly adequate cartridge.
Well, I know several old timers actually that have been hunting in Alaska their entire lives, and say they never shoot over 300 yards.
Yeah.
So if this one expands out to 450, and you're one of these people that doesn't want to shoot over 300,
right,
all day long,
right,
all day long,
absolutely,
anything you want to go after.
And now we already mentioned recoil with a 0.6 being 20 to 23 pounds. A 308 recoil out of a bolt gun of normal hunting weight for a rifle is probably going to be like
it's
what?
18.
Okay.
15.8 for 150. So the one I was just talking about would be a 15.8. So and that's if your rifle weighs 7.5 pounds.
Okay. So a scoped rifle with ammo in the belly, let's just call it an 8.5 to 9 pound gun.
So if you had like a Tikka T3X light with Leupold 5X,
then you might have 18 foot-pounds of recoil.
Maybe.
Which is extremely light and extremely shootable.
Yeah.
And the 308 you see a lot for like youth hunters. A lot of 308s are available in youth and women's models with shorter lengths of pull.
That's true. Yeah.
And just because of its shootability.
Yeah. And I know a lot of bigger guys that shoot it too.
Just
because it's
and I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying that the lower recoil does lend itself more to that application than a 0.6 would. If I had a kid that was say a 10-year-old boy that was getting into hunting, and I was having to choose between a 0.6 and a 308. I'm going to hand him the 308 because he's going to learn to shoot that better, and it's not going to, punch him in the mouth as much as a 0.6 will. It's not going to scare him.
I could see that. Yeah, that's true.
And so then just like with the 30-06 evolving then into the parent case for the 270, the 308, there was an adaptation of that into the 7mm 08.
Yep.
So it's the 308 parent case again.
Yep.
That they just necked down to 0.284 bore diameter. So again, you're getting a little bit narrower bullet, a little bit lighter bullet offerings, generally 139s, 140s,
speed,
maybe a 150 and a 708, but it's going a little bit faster than a 308 is.
Yeah.
And so your sectional densities in a 150 grain 7mm bullet are going to be better than a 150 grain out of a 30 caliber. So you generally get better penetration characteristics. And the 708 was made in 1980. So approximately 25, 30 years.
It was a Wildcat cartridge back in 1958.
Yep. And the Remington.
Yeah.
But it was commercially stamped in 1980.
Yep.
Right. So this came 25 to 30 years after the 308 was released to the commercial market.
Yeah.
The 708 came on the scene. And man, I know some people that have used 708s to great extents. My brother is one of them. He's killed a moose and a few caribou with one.
Yeah.
With the 139 grain Hornady GMX, which was their monolithic bullet, monometal copper and zinc alloy. And he killed a moose with one, and it worked just fine. And, performed very well. I think it was at 200 yards even. Yeah. And for a rifle of that light of a caliber, I would say, it worked just fine.
Yeah.
And the 708 especially shines for like that ultralight blacktail deer rifle.
Right.
Very little meat damage. It's probably not got enough gusto for moose and brown bear hunting, I would say. Although I do know of a few stories where it has been used on brown bears and with effectiveness. However, and this is what's going to lead into our next conversation that we'll get to later, but choosing, number one, the right projectile for it, choosing a tough enough bullet, and then being very selective and very patient with that kill shot. Not taking a marginal quartering shot, because you have to understand that you're shooting a lot lighter round that doesn't afford you the opportunity of shooting a diagonal shot through an animal. You ideally need that full-on broadside where you can put it in the ribs, where that bullet is going to get all the way through the lungs like it needs to kill it quickly.
And, and I don't want to discount the effectiveness of any of these rounds, but I am going to point out one massive difference that you will notice between these and, the cartridges we normally talk about on the show, and have historically talked about, which is going to be your energy, your ballistic energy. All of these ones we've talked about are very viable rounds, and a lot of them are arguably, ones you could hunt with your entire life and take on any hunt you want to. A big thing that kind of, one reason I'm glad we came up with this is because I was thinking about, like we spoke about in the last episode where we were talking about doing a 2-gun arsenal on some of these bigger game, in areas where you might have brown bears present and things like that when you're hunting for deer.
Yeah.
You could, in that instance, we were talking about having a 7mm Rem Mag and a larger bore rifle for a backup.
Right.
For him and his wife to carry.
Yes, that's right.
But, arguably, if you're going to run that, you don't have to run, a Magnum that has recoil, Magnum size recoil. If you're running a 2-gun arsenal with you and a partner, you can easily shoot, a 30-06 or a 270 or a 7mm Odd 8. But part of that is that you're not going to get, the energy that you would normally get or normally see from those other kinds of rounds, and so we'll talk more about the limitations of each round a little bit later. But, I just looked across the chart and, some of these ones that I'm saying, don't reach 1800 until say 450 yards for this one particularly. Your energy at impact at that range is only 1,124 pounds,
which is pretty anemic.
Which is, for the ballistic performance you're looking for, and that'll still, and don't get me wrong, that is still plenty for, say, you can probably even use that for caribou. Plenty for deer, sheep. Especially, sheep, things like that. But, it's something to keep in mind when you're going after the bigger animals like moose and bears and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you have the velocity? Yes. And arguably, if you have the velocity, then it will likely penetrate.
Right.
It's the energy comes more into play for penetration when you run into obstacles. You run into dense bone, or you mentioned stomach content several times, things like that. It's kind of
energy
the,
is directly
the push,
right.
So
yeah.
But
just a quick caveat while we're still on the 708, it only has 14 foot-pounds of recoil.
14 foot-pounds, huh?
Yeah. So extremely shootable.
That is a very, very usable cartridge there.
Very, very shootable cartridge.
And realistically, if you're going to hunt moose around Fairbanks out of a tree stand or on foot in the woods, realistically...
And you're going to be under 100 yards.
You could use that for everything but grizzly bears or brown bears would be mine. I wouldn't hunt a grizzly bear and a brown bear with that personally.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure there's guys that do it.
It wouldn't be my first choice.
It has been done.
But with the right bullet, again, with like a mono metal or a heavy partition, it would do the job.
Yep.
If you put the bullet in the ribs and poked it in the airbags, it would kill it.
Yep. And that's kind of the beauty of all this is, for general hunting.
Yeah.
Any one of these will.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about this. You want to go into the next version of a markdown from the 308?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about some of these other things just because they're things that I like. I like some of the options they provide. They're a little bit more limited than what we've been talking about. A lot more limited. But I don't know my history on guns like these guys do. And a lot of in the same cases necessarily. The 30-30. I don't know. That's older. Is that older than anything we've talked about?
It's pretty old.
That's old.
I think so.
Because it's a rimmed cartridge.
Yeah.
So the 30-06.
Obviously designed for lever gun usage.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's an excellent lever gun. I want to talk about the 30-30. I killed my first big game critter with a 30-30 when I was like 12.
Black
killed
bear
a black bear over bait.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the 30-30 is an excellent black bear over bait.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I also have down here. Now you just bought a 243 for
predator
hunting.
Yeah. Yep.
And we don't have to go off into all that right now, but 243. So 243 is an older 6mm cartridge.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
There's a couple of newer 6mm cartridges. I have a 30-30 now. It was a gift from my grandfather, and it's an original Marlin JM stamp. For those of you that know about that, can drool. I took it deer hunting. I didn't get a chance to use it. I want to do that again. I want to kill some deer with that. It's a great
quickly touch on the weight grain offerings that
you have. It's like a throwback.
Yeah.
I would say the weight gain offerings you're going to see with a 30-30 are going to be probably
150s.
I would say arguably a little bit less than you would probably see. Yeah, probably the same as a 308. But arguably a little bit less. Your heavy version is going to be a 150.
But talk about the difference in bullet styles, though, with it being a lever gun. These are not Spitzer bullets.
These aren't Spitzer or Spire points.
Yeah.
No.
Because if you do shoot a Spire point bullet in a lever action gun, then you're going to have a real problem when 3 or 4 rounds go off in your tube magazine from the recoil.
The tube magazine style, you don't want to have a spire point simply because, for those that haven't thought about it, when you're loading a tube magazine, those things are going in one after the other, just like a shotgun.
Front
you're
to
just
back.
Loading. Yep. And so think about, you have the tip, the very point of the bullet being somewhat sharp and somewhat stable.
Pointed.
And when you initiate the recoil of that first round, all those rounds in front of the one in the furthest back of the tube, that point of that furthest back bullet goes directly on top of the primer to the one in front of it.
Right.
And so on and so forth.
Right.
And so you could run into an issue where during that recoil, suddenly instead of 1 bullet going off, you've got 5 going off all at the same time.
2,
or whatever your
if more than one's going off, you've
got a real problem.
You've got a real problem. But that being said, most of the ones you're going to see are round nose.
They're round nose.
All the factory loads are going to be safe to shoot in a lever gun. As far as
they're designed with that in mind.
I have some for my 30-30. I have some Nosler ballistic tip. They've got the
green polymer
tip. They're the ballistic, but they've got the green polymer tip in there, which prevents.
Well, so that green polymer tip is specially designed, and it's not as hard, I don't believe, as a normal polymer tip on, say, a ballistic tip for a 30-06.
Yeah, I was able just to pull it out with my fingertips.
Yeah,
real easy.
Right.
It's
very soft, and it's not hard enough to set off that primer in the next 3 or 4 rounds in the tube magazine.
And it's designed to protect the bullet and the cartridges, but also still be able to get a better BC, ballistic coefficient.
Yeah, it's a little bit more aerodynamic.
But
most 30-30 bullets are going to be more of that round nose or flat nose design without any kind of a tip on them.
Yeah.
The Hornady Lever Revolution rounds are the same way as those Nosler ballistic tips are.
It's Leverution.
No, it's not.
No.
No. Anyway, those Hornady, the Hornady loads for the lever guns are also perfectly fine to use in lever guns.
Yeah. And within the spectrum of what a 30-30 is capable of, looking at the ballistic specs on it, I love the 30-30. And if you're hunting sub 300 yards all day long,
I would probably say sub 200.
I was going to say
you
the
think
same
sub 200?
Yeah. Being a lever gun,
I was going to say
maybe like a Marlin 336 with a longer barrel and with a scope, you might be able to get 250 out of it. But for the most part, I think a 30-30 is probably a sub 200
relatively
gun.
Low.
Yeah. Low velocity, and the bullets aren't very aerodynamic at all.
I mean, the ballistic tip would add some range, but only for smaller animals.
Yeah.
So now the felt recoil on that is about 10 foot-pounds.
10 foot. Wow.
Very, very low.
That's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
And it is it is not a straight wall, is it?
I would agree with you on the 200-yard thing
it's
now.
A neck down.
Yeah.
But one thing I love Ron Spomer is a huge guy in the bullet industry, and he uses the 30-30 quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend anybody, if you're looking into using a 30-30 for hunting, go watch his videos. He's got
on YouTube.
He's got a ton of great ones out there.
Yeah, he's a great guy in the industry.
Yeah,
he's fun to watch.
Yeah, he's great, and he's he really goes into a lot more detail than we're going to be able to just in this episode. But it's I think the 30-30 honestly has a place. I mean, I really. Again, I wouldn't necessarily want to take that as my moose hunting gun.
No.
But if you're, like you said, hunting close range, you absolutely could.
Close range, and you're careful with your shots, like we said earlier.
Careful with your shots, yep. You're not going to be, I mean, you'll break through at least, I would say in most cases, you'd break through the sholler.
Oh, yeah.
But, you're not going to be.
At close range.
Yeah, exactly. But,
and my recommendation with that too, like, if you're hunting, even if you're hunting grizzlies over a bait, if you're in a tree stand,
100% fine.
Oh,
awesome.
yeah.
Absolutely.
It's really good for, if your wife or girlfriend is very, or your child is small framed. The recoil on that is like, I was 12 when I was shooting this thing.
Yeah.
It never bothered me.
Yeah.
Hey guys, if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you've likely heard Dalton and I go back and forth about bullet construction and how I like rapid expanding bonded core bullets that leave massive wound channels. I've also stated I would never use a monolithic bullet. Well, I'm here to tell you about the company that finally changed my mind. Hammer Bullets produces what I would consider the most premium and best working monolithic bullets on the market today. These bullets are designed so that after penetrating the hide of an animal, the front half of the bullet explodes, shedding its petals and imparting massive damage to the vital areas while retaining the rear shank for maximum penetration, effectively closing the gap between lead core and monolithic construction. The guys at Hammer designed these bullets with 100% focus on how they perform once they reach their destination. But don't let that fool you. These bullets have amazing BCs and have specialized pressure grooves built in for amazing inherent accuracy. They have a minimum velocity rating of 1,800 feet per second, which allows for long-range shots but have no maximum velocity, making them perfect for every cartridge from your granddaddy's old 30-30 to the high-velocity rounds like the Weatherby 3378 without having to worry about your bullet failing. They've also recently partnered with Weatherby to provide factory ammunition for a multitude of cartridges. To view their expansive selection and find the perfect match for your hunting needs, go to hammerbullets.com to buy yours today and drop the hammer on your next adventure. Yeah, and actually, when you had brought up, earlier, if you had a 10-year-old kid, my thought instantly went to, I'd probably set them up with a 30-30.
Yeah, it depends on the hunt, really.
Well, right, it depends on the hunt, obviously.
And it depends on what they've been trained on, too. Right. If they've only ever shot, single shot, bolt action, mini 22s.
Oh, mine will shoot everything.
Well, as will my kids. Yeah. However, if someone is listening and their son or daughter has only ever shot bolt guns, then you'd want to probably set them up with a bolt gun that they're more familiar with.
Right, yeah.
Because a lever gun is a whole different thing to shoot. Obviously, there's still the same mechanics of aiming, but shooting iron sights versus a red dot or a scope with magnification is a whole different ballgame. And it's more difficult to explain the concept of iron sights to kids than it is just put the dot or the crosshair on where you want to shoot. Because everybody shoots iron sights differently. You're going to run into people that say, put the dot over the target, or put the dot halfway into the target, or put the target on top of the dot. And there's all kinds of different ideas.
That would just depend on how you zero it. I mean, but, I would say it's not that hard. I've trained kids how to shoot before, and They pick it up pretty easy. I mean, now, it's not a terribly complex method. I'm specifically
talking about the old buckhorn style, where the rear sight is a V style in some manner. A peep sight is much more natural to the eye because it's natural for you to just center things with your eyes, okay? So looking through a circle and putting a dot in the middle of the circle is very natural for a lot of people. That's how I learned to shoot, was with a peep sight on an old 22.
Yeah, you run into issues with that style of sight where you're and arguably, I mean, this is something you should be doing with any kind of sight, but your eye box placement is extremely important in those situations.
Yeah.
Any variation of, a little bit left, a little bit right will throw your zero off with those. And so you really have to practice and be very disciplined to keep the exact same.
Which is why a lot of people put kids with like a red dot or a scope.
Right, yeah.
Because it's much simpler to just get them to learn to, and then as they get older and they can understand better how to explain that, then if you put them with a 30-30 with iron sights, it's a lot easier to get them to latch on to that concept.
Something that was great, and this will work for people in Alaska, especially who go camping and stuff. My dad gave me, I had a Chipmunk 22, and then I shot a 10-22 after that. And the Chipmunk had a peep sight, and it taught me to use a peep sight because I'd plinkett cans all day long. Right? As much ammo as he'd give me, I'd shoot.
In your backyard?
No, but not where we live. But whenever we'd go camping or hunting or out to the trapline cabin, I was plinkett cans. I was shooting every squirrel.
Yeah,
and
like you should.
Yep, shoot every squirrel I could, and
free rats.
And squirrels up here don't have meat on them. That's edible.
I would disagree. I know some people that eat squirrel.
I don't want people to get the idea that we're just shooting squirrels.
No.
These squirrels we have up here.
These are not like big fox squirrels. That
are they are itty bitty.
There's not enough meat on a squirrel.
There's a reason
to feed a child.
There's a reason we call them tree rats.
Yeah,
and they do get into everything. And like at trapline cabins, they'll get into the roof.
They will wreck a cabin.
They can make a mess.
Yeah, but no, I'd shoot those, and then I went to the 1022, which had the V sight on it. And just the amount I shot both of those, and then I picked up ended up with like a 22 pistol. I shot a bunch as a young teenager, and just having that ability, just shooting those things all the time.
Practice.
My dad gave me a few pointers, walked me through gun safety all the time when I'd ask for a gun and stuff. Yeah. And even now, if like my little brother was at the house the other day, and I was like, I keep my gun. If I'm sitting at my desk, it's usually there just because that's where I have my keys and stuff, and I was like, hey, and some people say, well, you got kids and stuff. Like, yes, if somebody's kids are over there, I'm going to move it, but my kids aren't going to touch it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, and it's only there if I'm around, right? It's not sitting out if I'm not.
Yeah.
And, just disclaimer, but my little brother was there, and I was like, so I took my gun off and I set it down. I said, and I went to walk through the gun rules, 3 rules of gun safety, and like, hey, it's sitting here. Yes, it's loaded, right? Like, don't touch it.
And to clarify, your brother is of age to understand instructions.
Yes, he is.
You wouldn't do that with like a 3-year-old,
right? Well, a 3-year-old wouldn't have been able to reach where my gun was either.
Right. Anyway, jumping back into this here, I know you touched on 243 and 6 millimeter.
Hit that a little bit more
before we do that.
Okay.
Because the 243 is a variation of the 308 cartridge.
Okay.
But there's another one on the way down.
Is there?
The 260 Remington.
Yeah.
So the 260 Remington is the same thing, but neck down to a 6.5 millimeter bullet.
Okay.
Then that's it held a little bit of popularity there for a while. It's kind of been taken over by all the flood of more common 6.5 bullets that are cartridges that are available.
PRC, Creedmoor.
And just to clarify, the 260 Remington is a 6.5 millimeter.
It is a 6.5 millimeter bullet.
It's just the American branding 260 in inches instead of millimeters, which was largely a European thing at the time.
Right. Well, and you see different numbers being used by different manufacturers for some things. Yeah. Largely, let's say you've got the 375 Weatherby and the 378 Weatherby per se. You could use that as a thing. You've got the 340 Weatherby that shoots a 338 bullet.
Right.
One thing I've realized with this is the numbers that they're using aren't necessarily exact, in every application. Now, you do have a lot that are the 308 Winchester, the 338 Win Mag, things like that. But even the 300 Win Mag is not technically using the right number. It's a 308 Win Mag.
Right.
Yeah. So,
right. Well,
it's, you kind of take the numbers for what they are, but it is a 6.5 millimeter bullet. And so it's going to be the same thing you're going to see with a lot of these more common modern ones. And, I don't know. I would say it's still a very viable cartridge for what it is, and for
I believe that the 260 Remington is equal to and maybe even more than a 6.5 Creedmoor in velocity, isn't it?
So a lot of the arguments you're going to see with the Creedmoor arguments that you'll see online is that it basically is a duplicate. The 6.5 Creedmoor essentially duplicated the velocities of the 260 Remington. But they did it with the ability to load a longer, higher BC bullet. And so that's really where it comes with a tighter twist rate, and things like that. So you can shoot the heavier, longer bullets.
Right.
A lot of and honestly, that's mostly the design with all of these newer cartridges that are coming out these days. Is they're not really doing anything revolutionary for, let's say, speed or anything like that.
Just adapting it for long range bullets.
They're adapting it for the way the bullet market is going. I mean, you look at these days, everybody's coming out with the heavier, longer, higher BC bullets. BC is kind of like the big hit thing right now. Yeah. And arguably it is a very useful thing to be doing to these bullets.
But in layman's terms, ballistic coefficient is basically putting a gauge on how easily a bullet glides through the air.
Right.
That's the dumbed down version.
It's your aerodynamics rating, basically. Exactly. It's going to the higher your BC is, the farther it's going to carry that velocity, and the farther it's going to carry that energy.
Right.
And so, and that's one big thing when you're looking at, do you want a partition or do you want an AccuBond? Mm-hmm. Not only is there a difference in the construction of the bullets on that level, but there's also, one has a much lower BC. The partition is a rounder nose. It's a little, it's a little bit wider at the face. Yeah. So it's not going to be as
well, it's just like
aerodynamic. But the 6.5s, honestly, as long as you use them appropriately, I don't think there's anything wrong with them.
Well, you have a 6.5, don't you?
I have a 6.5 PRC. Yeah. And the 6.5 PRC is essentially, I would say, to anybody that knows what the 6.5 284 Norma is, it's basically the ballistic equivalent to that. But the 6.5 284 Norma is more of a reloader special. You don't really see ammo on the shelf for it.
I don't think it was even Sammy spec'd until Nosler did it.
Yeah, and maybe.
Was that correct? Or was that No. I'm thinking of the 280 Ackley.
Okay, yeah. The 280 Ackley. Yeah. Oh, that's another one we need to touch on.
Yes.
And but the 260 Remington, I mean, it's been around for a little while now. Let's see. It was introduced in the 90s, so 97.
The 260 Remington was.
Yeah, and and I don't think it really took off the way a lot of these other ones have. It was kind of ahead of its time, you could say. Yeah. But I do know guys that have used them and guys that have, built rifles specifically to use them. Yeah. And for, smaller critters, I wouldn't recommend using this for a moose.
Yeah.
But, if you're just going after caribou at closer ranges, or even sheep, or, black-tailed deer, things like that.
Absolutely
will work 100% of the time.
Now, you don't see very much 260 Remington ammo around anymore.
You'll see it on the shelves occasionally.
Yeah.
I do still see boxes at Sportsman's,
but it's nowhere nearly as common as like a 6.5 Creedmoor or a 6.5 PRC or a 708 or a 308 is.
So that's one thing, though, that, when you're looking at cartridges, there is the factor that, popularity plays in a role with ammo selectivity or ammo availability, but there is another side to that, where if you're utilizing something that's maybe not as popular, you might not run into that ammo all the time, but it's going to sit on the shelf a lot longer.
Yeah.
You run into those issues, like 300 Win Mag is extremely popular here in Alaska, but because of that, it's on the shelf for 24 hours.
Yeah, but maybe. It's there. But it's there.
But that 260 will sit
on
that 260 will sit on the shelf for,
But you can walk into Sportsman's once a week, and at some point you'll pick up some 300 Win Mag.
That's true. But
I can walk into Sportsman's 3 times a week, and
I'm just saying there's a flip side to the argument.
Now, and then the next step down is the 243.
Is
Winchester.
the 243, right. Which is massively more.
Well, if
popular.
you want to talk about the 280, we should do that.
Well, no.
We can do this
another time. Okay.
It's along the same lines.
The 280 will go in the next category. Right. So the 243 being a 6mm bullet, average bullet weight range is around 80 to 90 to 100 grains, maybe.
100 on the heavy side, yeah.
There's some like 108s and stuff like that.
Yeah. But for the averages, I believe it's 80 or 90 or 100 grains.
Yeah.
And that. You mentioned that you wouldn't want to shoot a moose with a 260 Remington.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially like shooting a moose with a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yes.
Just with more modern bullet selections with a 6.5 Creedmoor. And it does work just fine if you shoot a properly constructed bullet within a few hundred yards in the ribs. Right.
That was more of a personal.
Shooting it in the lungs. But yes, you wouldn't choose it for that.
No.
But you also have rifles.
Specifically for
that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Now, the 243 has killed an absolute truckload of moose in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And it will continue to.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
There are a whole lot of people that live in outlying villages in Alaska that shoot moose every year with 243s.
Yes.
And there's a whole lot of talk in the Alaska world about, people kill moose every year with a 243. Okay. Let's park on that for a minute. That doesn't mean that it's the greatest idea for
right.
Does it work? Yes. Is it going to be the cleanest, quickest kill and give you the best results?
Yeah.
Unlikely.
Well, and that's kind of where my statement came into play is I kind of draw a line where I cut off certain animals for certain cartridges or certain caliber sizes. And my line for moose is is right there at the 7mm mark.
Yeah.
That's the smallest I'm personally willing to go for an animal that size. There's plenty of people that kill moose with the 22-250.
Sure.
It's been done, and that's, especially if we're getting into the ones that are used out in the, the outlying areas.
Yeah.
But that's not, these, they're either head shooting or they're able to get in super close.
Mm-hmm.
These are areas that aren't heavily pressured in most cases. So they're, and hunters typically that are very experienced and very good at stalking.
Yeah.
They're not going to be in that situation where they're shooting a moose at 350 yards with a 243. Right. They're going to be shooting it at 100 yards with a 243.
Well, and that's where, and the reason I put in like the 30-30 and the 243 on this list personally, because you guys had some of the bigger cartridges already in there, was because, bear baiting for me, you can shoot a bear at a bear bait with almost anything.
Oh, yeah.
And do it. And be very confident in what because you're going to be able to choose your shot selection, right?
I would have no hesitation of shooting, and I would go as far as to say even an interior grizzly bear, with like 100 grain Nosler partition out of a 243. If that's all I had, and a grizzly bear walked into my bear bait and I was in control of it and I could take a perfect shot through the ribs, that is a dead bear 10 times out of 10.
And I was just going to say that is a very specific situation.
It's a very controlled environment. You're able to be very patient.
You know your exact range.
Yeah.
You are able to be patient and wait for the perfect shot.
Right.
You're not going to be shooting quartering. You're not going to be shooting, through the chest. You're not going to be shooting. You can wait, like you said, for that perfect broadside shot.
And that's the thing where the smaller cartridges that you hunt with, the more limitations that you have to impose on yourself from an ethical standpoint and from a performance standpoint on your cartridge's abilities. And with a 243, like you said, in a perfect scenario, sure, you can kill a bear over a bait with it.
Yeah.
And sure, you can kill moose with it.
Yeah.
But it's not our ideal choice. I only own a 243 for the purposes of predator hunting.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I shoot 80 grain hand loads with full metal jackets that are slowed down below what average velocities are. And that's to be able to shoot a little bit heavier bullet going slower that won't expand, that won't do hardly any hide damage if I'm trying to save pelts on predators.
Mm-hmm.
So
I wanted to go from the 243 to a same caliber bullet, which is the 6mm. And there's a 6mm Creedmoor, which is
relatively new, I think.
It is, but it's essentially a 243, but like the 6.5 Creedmoor, it's designed to be able to accept those longer, higher BC bullets, and it's more readily available in
match
a lot
grade
faster
chambers.
Twist rates.
Yeah.
Now, what surprised me about that one was when I looked at it. Typically when you're looking at like the Creedmoors or the PRCs, they almost look like short mags essentially. They're very fat. They're not very long cartridges, and they have very sharp shoulders, and they kind of tuck in really quick and have very long necks. The 6mm Creedmoor doesn't look like that. It's kind of odd.
I was going to get a 6mm Creedmoor for the same reason you got a 243, and I was going to get it more because ammo availability. It's very wide, at least in Fairbanks.
It's everywhere.
I can pick. I got my choice of 10 different rounds. Factory ammo. I don't think I'm going to. I may at some point, but it's essentially a 243, same velocity, pretty much the same, but the biggest difference is being the neck is actually what's different on the cartridge. That's one of the only differences in the cartridge is the neck, the angle of the neck, and you can load
of you mean
of the shoulder, right?
The shoulder degrees,
right? Sorry. Anyway, and the fact that you can in a factory rifle you can get a lot higher, faster twist rates.
Right.
So if you're
you can shoot those real heavy for caliber bullets.
Competition or just longer range, whatever you're trying to do, especially on like
the
a
6
Predator.
Creedmoor is very popular in like the precision rifle shooting competitions because it has extremely low recoil. It's a very efficient bullet. You can stretch it way out there. And if all you're doing is shooting in steel competitions, then it's hard to go wrong with that round.
The Creedmoors in general, the 6.5 and the 6, that's pretty much what they're designed for. 100%. And they just kind of got adapted into the hunting world.
Well, the 6.5 Creedmoor was introduced in 2007?
7 or 4, something like that. It's been around for a little bit.
I think it was 2007, but even if it was just 2007.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Yep. 2007.
We didn't start seeing it show up in the mainstream big game hunting market until the last, 8 years,
something like that. Yeah,
because
maybe even not even that long.
As bullets came out that made it more suited for hunting,
right.
guys realized, wow, this thing doesn't kick for anything, and it's very efficient, and it does retain enough energy. It's basically a 260 Remington that you can shoot heavy for caliber bullets out of, and a factory rifle with a tighter twist rate.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't I shoot this thing? And it just caught on.
Yeah.
So,
and for reference point, I guess we didn't really go into it. You know, the typical range you're going to see in a 260 Remington is going to be closer to like the 120 range, you know, as far as grains for bullets.
Yeah,
you know, you're going to be shooting, you know, 100 grainers, 120 grainers, things like that. You know, there are some 140 grain options, but
generally those won't stabilize.
They won't stabilize, and you know, you might have to worry a little bit about your seating depth.
And that's because at the time that the 260 Remington came out, they weren't twisting those barrels tightly like they are now in the 6.5 Creedmoor for those longer bullets that take a tighter twist rate to be able to stabilize.
Because your average with something like a Creedmoor or a PRC, you know, I personally prefer my PRC, but you know, the average bullet weight you're going to see is closer to the higher end of what a 260 would be able to do.
It's
like
you know,
it's that 143, the one, and I want to say the ABLRs are 142s or something like that.
Yeah. And the Hornady ELD match bullets are 147
correct.
Grains.
Yeah. But you know, and that's a big thing with, you know, like you pointed out, you know, I mean, these newer cartridges, they really help you out.
Yeah.
With that. And but you know, with that, don't just think that, you know, everything's a do-all. You know, we're bringing in some usable cartridges that can definitely be used for different hunting applications. We'll go into more specific hunting applications here soon, but you know, the I guess you could say the arguments come into play when people try to go beyond the ethical limitations of a lot of these cartridges.
Where you see a guy on YouTube shooting a bull elk at 850 or 900 yards with a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Right. And you know that bullet's, you know, not going anywhere near 1,800 feet per second when it reaches there.
Yeah.
And
very, very not smart. We'll just put it that
way. Just because you can hit it doesn't mean you should shoot it.
Exactly.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And, but did you have any more you wanted to go into?
I did want to talk about something real quick. I said I wasn't going to, and I changed my mind.
No.
Yeah, right. So there's a 6mm Creedmoor.
Is this Mo's bonus segment coming in early?
No, this isn't Mo's bonus segment. This kind of just works right in with what we're talking about. The 6mm Creedmoor, and I was looking at that, and another one that popped up was the 6mm ARC or ARC.
Yep.
Which is developed by Hornady. It's called the Advanced Rifle Cartridge. Yep. It was developed in 2020. So it's basically
very
less than 3 years old.
Yeah.
And I started looking into it. At first, I was like, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I think there is a bolt action rifle for sale in Fairbanks and 6mm ARC.
Howa just released their mini action bolt action rifle series, and it's offered in 6 ARC.
I believe Bergara has a rifle in 6 ARC. I believe Christensen has some rifles in 6 ARC. If they don't, they're going to.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised at the bolt action offerings in it, because this round was developed for the Department of Defense by Hornady for the AR-15 platform.
I was just going to say that, like, once you take it out of the AR platform, I don't really understand why you would want it.
It's an extremely efficient cartridge.
It is an extremely efficient cartridge, but
why wouldn't you just shoot the 6 Creedmoor?
Even the Creedmoor.
I don't know. I mean,
and there's no recoil to that either.
Right.
So
I don't know
if
why.
If you're stuck on 6mm and you're in a bolt action, then why wouldn't you just shoot a 6 Creedmoor?
I don't know. I'm not trying to make an argument for bolt action. If that's what somebody wants to shoot, I have no problem with them shooting that out of a bolt action.
Yeah.
It is a super light, small, short action. Very, very short. I mean, it's an AR-15 action. Now, I'm looking at getting one in an AR-15.
Yep.
For predators, and it's and you can get without reducing your velocity, you can get like an 18-inch barrel. I mean, you could get a very short bolt action rifle out of that.
Absolutely.
And still potentially hunt, deer and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And you're going to have the accuracy and velocity, out of this it to be a little lower than the Creedmoor,
Right.
but you're going to have reliability on this in a very short barrel that you wouldn't necessarily maybe have in a Creedmoor.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of reasons and options there.
Was this introduced to the Department of Defense as a potential replacement for 5.56 NATO?
It was not specifically as a replacement, I don't believe. I believe it was an alternative too, because it's not just the Department of Defense isn't going and replacing 5.56. What they've been
looking into it for a while.
There's a particular, and it's all, secret, but there's a particular Department of Defense customer or person in the Department of Defense who's the customer for the custom.
I wonder who that could be.
6mm. I honestly, I believe it's it's a group in special operations somewhere, either the Green Berets or the SEALs or something like that.
Yeah.
Because the ability, a 5.56 or a 2.23, you don't have a lot of even against soft human targets. You don't have a lot range.
Yeah. Well, because
reliable range.
Aren't they shooting like a 70 grain bullet or
55,
something?
55.
Yeah, that's standard.
And with the
they
6
can't
millimeter,
even shoot a 70.
No.
With a 6mm ARC or ARC, they can shoot in the same size and weight rifle. Basically, they can shoot 100 grain round.
Is that the military round? Is 100 grains?
I believe so. It's around the same.
Okay.
Because the one that the military shooting is also
just
developed by
about
Hornady.
doubling the bullet weight, which then extends your range.
And they can fit in about the same size and just a little bit bigger mag. They can fit like 25 rounds than a 30 round.
Well, and that's kind of what they've been looking at is more effectiveness without losing too much capacity.
Right.
Basically, they're trying to. It's kind of breaking the point between the three. It's got a better trajectory than a 308.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It doesn't carry the energy as far.
Yeah.
Because it's not as heavy as a bullet.
But it's the efficiency that they're looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have a round that you can then clear a room with, but also go up on the roof and snipe guys from 400 or 500 yards, no problem.
And they're
with
also
an 18-inch barrel.
Yeah, and they're also not trying to shoot, big animals or anything like that.
Right.
The biggest would be,
But this would be perfectly applicable for deer hunting if that's what you wanted to do.
And I was just going to bring, there's groupings that you can put animals into based on weight, roughly. Absolutely. And this would be great for an animal. I would say probably upwards into the 350 pound range, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
If you're looking at, you're taking it deer hunting, I mean, if you live somewhere where you can hunt multiple species of deer, it's a very viable cartridge for that.
Guys love it for predators. I've seen videos all the time since I've been into this. Guys are shooting, guys are popping coyotes at 500-600 yards.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just talking more specifically big game, big game
right.
hunting, which, you could technically, I guess, I bet those rifles, the bolt actions for this are probably pretty light too.
So
I would say
the Hala mini series is stupid light.
Yeah,
the other advantage,
which might make it a decent. I wouldn't carry it into, as your only rifle if you're going into grizzly country, but a good sheep gun. Possibly.
The other big advantage.
If guys are doing it with a 25-06, then why not a 6 ARC?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point.
I was going to say the other big advantage to the 6 ARC in a bolt action rifle over an AR-15 platform is in a bolt action, the SAMI specs rate it another 10,000 PSI.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's
so
pretty
you
common.
can push a couple hundred more feet per second in velocity.
Yeah.
With still like an 18-inch barrel, whereas you're pushing 26 to 2,700 feet per second in an 18-inch barrel on an AR platform.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, maybe just a little bit longer of a barrel on a bolt action, you're pushing.
What's the average chamber pressure allowance for an AR platform?
About 52,000.
Yeah, I think it's in the 50,000.
So you could get over 60,000 PSI.
I think 62,000.
Yeah. Now I would be interested to see what's going to happen with factory ammo when as this bolt action.
How do you delineate between the two?
I was going to say because I own an AR-15 chambered in 450 Bushmaster. And the Bushmaster comes in both AR platform and bolt action.
Right.
And so there actually is, when you're looking at the ammo in the stores, you have to look at the box because there are ones that are chambered specifically for the bolt actions and ones that are chambered for semi-automatics. And the ones that are specifically for the bolt actions say in big letters on them, not for semi-automatic.
Right.
And so I'd be curious to see if that becomes a thing with the 6 ARC as well.
I think it would because the same thing, I mentioned, I think in the last podcast that, if you're carrying a 45-70, carry a Marlin.
Yeah.
Or, if you're going to carry a lever action 45-70, actually the biggest reason for that, and it may have changed now with some of the changes. Henry's making some big changes in the last year or so, but the Marlins have much higher pressure ratings than the Henrys. And there's actually like a lot of the Buffalo bore stuff says use only in Marlin lever action rifles.
Right. Same type of deal with a Smith & Wesson 44 Magnum versus a Ruger 44 Magnum.
Yeah.
On the Buffalo bore plus P plus with a 340 grain hard cast.
Yeah.
On that 340 grain box, it says for use in Ruger handguns only.
And if you look at, the pistols themselves, because I carry a Smith & Wesson 44 Magnum, and it does give you a warning to not use plus P rounds.
Right.
Because that bridge that goes above the cylinder, you'll blow that clean off.
Oh, yeah. If you don't blow your whole hand off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or put out your eye.
And that kind of does suck because I like the feel of the Smith & Wessons a lot better than I do the Blackhawks or the Red Hawks. But, that's neither here nor there. That's not what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's jump into the next thing, guys. The next bracket we were going to go into, and we won't.
Did you want to touch on the 280 Ackley?
That'll be in this. Yeah.
That's not Does that count as this?
I think so.
Okay. Well, it's personal opinion.
I will explain why.
Not technically.
Hey, we tried to get him to put it in earlier. And
we'll get there. Well, I have a plan.
Well,
so
okay, go ahead.
No. You know what? Go ahead. I
was going to say, let's go over the
relinquish.
Let's go over the uses for these and why we would go into this next group first.
Okay. Well, then let's just backtrack a little bit. Then,
okay,
the whole bracket that we just talked about, is pretty broad.
It is
for general purposes. The 270 and the .6 are definitely the two most capable cartridges as a do-it-all round.
Right.
Some folks will argue and elbow their way in with a 308.
Yeah.
That's teetering on the edge, in my opinion, because of the anemic velocity that you get out of it.
Yeah.
With a 180.
Yeah.
Now, a 270 or a .6 will work for anything in the state with the proper bullet and with the right shot placement.
Yeah.
Everything else that we talked about, the 308, the 708, any of the 6.5s, the 6mm, and the 30-30, for the most part, they're going to be very limited with range. We mentioned the 30-30, sub 200 for sure.
Yeah.
Everything else, for the most part, is going to be sub 350. The 708, the 308. Now, there will be exceptions with
I would agree with you on that.
Different load offerings, but when you factor in the energy ratings, if you're looking for enough poop, if I can say it that way, with the energy, then you're generally going to cap most of these rounds, with the exception of the 270 and the .6, at 350 or less.
And I would agree with you on that, because you're really... When you hit 350 with most of these cartridges, you're dancing below, that 1,500 foot-pound mark, which isn't a set-in-stone marker, but it's a good guideline.
Yes.
It's a good...
It's one of many ways to what's the word I'm looking for? To gauge the effectiveness.
Yeah.
And it's not just velocity. It's not just energy. It's everything put together. And then you got to factor in bullet weight.
Right.
And so the lighter you get, the more careful you have to be about all those things put together.
If you're shopping for a cartridge that's kind of in the range of what we just talked about, a good way to look at these things is they do give you the numbers on the back of the box, but I wouldn't use those as gospel, because who knows what kind of barrel they were testing those cartridges in.
Right.
Yeah.
Who knows the situations that was in. And I have found them to be somewhat inaccurate.
If the
on
308 ammo box velocity was with a 24-inch barrel, and you have a 20-inch barrel, you're going to get wildly different results out of your gun.
And so what I would recommend, when we're looking at different cartridges, we're looking at, largely ballistic apps. I use Strelak Pro, but there's several other ones out there that are free. I would recommend downloading one of these, utilizing it, getting used to the interface, and really starting to look at these things side by side, and really start to look. If you're, like I mentioned, the 1,500 foot-pounds of energy, that's, again, not a set in stone. You can still break bone below that. You can still, get into the vitals and get plenty of penetration.
Yeah.
But it's a good guideline. It's a good place to kind of set your goal. And, with most of the ones we just talked about, you're not going to be able to get that past that, like you said, that 350-yard mark.
Yeah. So if you are looking for a more potent cartridge.
Right.
That can kill all the bigger animals that we were talking about.
And a big reason we usually talk about these things.
You're going to be searching in the Magnum category of cartridges.
Yep.
And that's going to be the more common ones are going to be like the 7mm Remington Magnum, the 300 Win Mag, and then you've got all of the Remington Ultra Mags, most of the Nosler cartridges,
the Weatherbees, things
the
like
Weatherbees, yes, and then a few of the Winchester Short Magnums as well.
Yeah,
and those are giving you Let's just use, for instance, a real common one. We're going to compare to the 30-06 and the 300 Win Mag.
Yeah.
There's going to be, instead of like the 30-06 to 308, we said about 200 feet slower is the 308 than the 06.
Yep.
You're going to see that inversely when comparing the 300 Win Mag to the 30-06.
Yeah.
With the same grain weight bullets, with a 180 in each, you'll see about 27 to 2750 in a 06, and you'll see about 2950 in a 300 Win Mag.
Right. Yeah.
So about 200 feet per second for the same weight bullet in each caliber. So you're flattening out that trajectory.
Yes.
You're giving yourself a lot more reach. You're going to be able to extend your effective shooting distance quite a bit. And even if you're not into long range, you're going to kill stuff with a little bit more authority at even those shorter ranges than you would with like a slower cartridge. Now, the 300 Win Mag is probably the most popular one on this whole list.
Oh, by far.
We're not going to go into all the different Weatherby rounds and all the different Ultra Mags and all the different short mags.
The biggest thing is just to know there's no difference in projectile.
Yes.
The only difference is the performance that projectile is flung out into the air with.
It's largely velocity.
Yeah.
Now,
they're just a bigger case that allows it to hold more powder, and that muzzle velocity, like Dalton said, is what you're chasing with these.
In recent years, Hornady has changed this with the advent of the PRC cartridges.
Right.
Which is precision rifle cartridge.
Yep.
And for instance, a 300 PRC is not leaps and bounds faster necessarily than a 300 Win Mag. However, when we were comparing the 260 Remington to a 6.5 Creedmoor, it's a tighter twist barrel, which and it's a different chamber design. It's all match grade chambers, and they're throated longer to be able to accept very heavy for caliber bullet weight,
right?
Which give you much higher ballistic coefficients, which again allows you to stretch out much farther on your shooting distances if you're into the longer range shooting. If you're not, then buying a 300 PRC does you almost no good if you're never going to shoot past 400 yards.
Well, kind of, because with a bigger bullet, not only do you get better BCs and a longer range shot ability, you do get more energy in the short run. You can
shoot a 220 out of a 300 Win Mag.
You can.
And have just as much effectiveness as a 220 out of a 300 PRC.
I'm not going to argue that because that's the reason I don't own a 300 PRC.
And here's my big beef with
there is a difference
with the 300 PRC.
Yeah.
Is that the only factory bullet offerings right now are geared towards that ultra long range hunter. They're the 212 ELDX, the 225 ELD match.
Yeah.
And those are not bullets that we recommend for hunting the bigger classes of animals in Alaska. All the calibers all the cartridges that we've talked about, and even when I mentioned the 270 being great for like moose and caribou and even grizzly bears, is with that in mind, you need to pick a properly constructed bullet design, like a Nosler partition or a Barnes monometal type bullet. That gives you a tough bullet that'll get where it needs to go. I would take, and this is just me personally, if I had to pick one gun to shoot everything in Alaska, I would sooner take a 30-06 with a 168 grain Barnes TTSX than a 300 PRC with a 212 ELDX. That's just me personally. I'm going to get better penetration characteristics than that 212 ELDX will. And that ELDX is going to come apart. It's just going to come apart.
Now,
that's not my cup of tea.
I would be interested to see what's going to happen. I don't know. You'd probably know, Mo. I know that the military have been looking at adopting the 300 PRC.
Oh, they already have.
I think that went through. I'm just not 100% on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I would be interested to see what's going to happen in the next coming years with that, because typically speaking, when the military adopts a cartridge, that booms its popularity.
Well,
and
so
it
helps that the PRC is a Hornady round, and Hornady is the king of marketing in the bullet industry.
But
it's not going anywhere.
Like you said, there's only a couple of offerings right now.
I already know of several developments from multiple different manufacturers to make factory ammo.
Well, and there's other ones
in hunting bullets. For
and there are other offerings for the other PRCs, like the 6.5. Nosler offers different bullets for the 6.5
Barnes
PRC.
Does as
Barnes
well.
does. And so I would be interested to see what's going to come about with the 300 PRC.
Right.
I like what a lot of these newer cartridges are doing. I like kind of the direction they're heading with, because I have heard people refer to the 300 PRC as a hot rod or something like that. It's really not.
It's not. No.
It's not. But
it delivers the same bullet more efficiently.
My problem with
it delivers a more efficient bullet more efficiently.
Right.
My problem with the 300 PRC is not that I don't think there's a place for it. I think it's ahead of its time. I think there are bullets that can be shot effectively out of that, but I don't think there's enough of them yet to make it a viable option for most people.
So Barnes introduced new for this year a 212 grain LRX.
Right.
I like the sound of that.
Extremely long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a 212. I believe it's a 212.
Yeah.
And now, for folks that don't know, the monometal bullets generally cannot be made as heavy in a weight grain as a lead bullet could be, a lead core bullet. And that's because copper is lighter than lead.
Mm-hmm.
And to get copper to be as heavy as a lead bullet, you got to make it ultra long. And most rifles have a hard time stabilizing a super long lead bullet.
That's typically why they'll recommend, if you're going with a lead bullet, to kind of drop in weight a little bit.
Monometal.
Man, I got to get into reloading.
Yeah.
I want some of those.
But that 212 grain LRX was specifically designed with the PRC 300 in mind.
Yeah.
To be able to give hunters the option of shooting their, if it's their favorite round, they can now shoot that with a Barnes bullet.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to get too off in the weeds about that.
It's an easy thing to do.
Let's swing back into the more common ones in the Magnum calibers.
Yeah.
In Alaska, you're going to see a whole lot of 300 Win Mags.
You are. Yeah.
Now, your factory bullet offerings are going to be very diverse. 150s, 165s, 180s being the most common by far. And those are pushing 3,000 feet per second, just below that with a 24-inch barrel usually.
190s and 200s are pretty common,
and then 190s and 200s are also readily available. The Hornady factory loadings in their Precision Hunter line are a 178 grain ELDX and a 200 grain ELDX.
Yeah. And likewise, you can find the Nosler partitions in 200 grain pretty easily.
Those are, I haven't seen those in a while.
I guess I wouldn't say easily,
those are hard to find.
They're around. They're,
and that 200 grain partition out of a 300 Win Mag is a potent killing bullet.
Oh yeah,
that is a great round, and it's not all that great of a longer range bullet by any means.
No,
but it'll get you out to 450, no problem.
Yeah, that's what I shot my deer with
at 2,000 feet a second easily, and for anything under 450 or 350 or 300, anything sub 300, you are gonna smack it.
It's gonna hit like a hammer.
That is a lot of bullet for a 30 caliber, and that's a great design. But the 300 Win Mag is, I would be surprised if the 300 Win Mag didn't sell more ammo in Alaska every year than anything else.
I would say easily it does.
I would be shocked if it wasn't at least in the top 3.
And like we talked about before, it flies off the shelf. Unless you're looking at the the kind of the cheapy, little branded ammo that nobody recognizes and nobody really uses. The standard kind of lower end cup and core bullets. Yeah. Those will sit on the shelf for a little bit just because nobody's really buying them up.
Right.
But if you get any kind of the Nosler, the Barnes, the Hornady,
it's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's out of there.
And so what we were saying earlier about the 30-06, where with a 180 grain AccuBond, you were going to be capped out at about 525 for 1,800 feet per second minimum expansion velocity. Yeah. If you put that same bullet in a factory loading for 300 Win Mag, in about 2960, you're going to be easily stretching another 100 and 150 yards.
Oh, all day long.
Out to well past 600 yards.
Yeah, I believe that when I had 180 AccuBonds loaded in mine, I was sitting pretty comfortable around 650 as my capable range.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And that's not loaded hot either.
And with a hand load with like a 190 grain AccuBond long range, you're pushing well out close to that 1,000-yard mark.
Yeah, and beyond.
Yeah, exactly. Well beyond what probably 98% of hunters are going to be able to ethically shoot in the field.
And honestly, probably what you should ethically shoot in the field.
Yeah. Right.
You know, I've seen videos of these guys that do the extreme long range hunting, and not to say you can't, but most people shouldn't. I would say that the people that are capable of that are probably a handful.
Yeah.
You know, and unless you are 1,000% capable.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even try it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's just a point where you should cut yourself off, you know, and, but
don't just do it for the gram.
Right.
Yeah. But that is the benefit of these Magnum cartridges is pushing farther out. You know, I mean, you could compare, man, that'd be a heck of a comparison, but the 7mm Rem Mag compared to the 7mm 08.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
leaps and bounds,
bounds, you know, same projectile, much, much faster.
Yeah.
And
well, let's jump on that then. The 7 Mag is my baby.
It is.
I've killed well over 20 animals in Alaska with a 7mm Remington Magnum.
Yep.
My first 7 Mag was a Tikka T3X, and I upgraded to a Christensen 7mm.
You know, and that Tikka though was
years ago.
Was put holes inside of holes at 100, 200 yards
with 139 grain LRXs. It shot very well. I had a much harder time with heavier bullets in that rifle
because common with
because it's a slower twist rate.
So that's one thing, not to go off, but really annoys me about Tikkas, especially the older ones.
It.
Yeah, they fixed it. All of the newer 30 calibers are coming in with 1 in 10 twists now.
Yeah.
So
I really kind of want a 1 in 9, but
well, you're gonna have to go with the PRC for that.
Yeah.
And actually, you're kind of trying a 1 in 8 with the PRC,
no.
if not a 1 in 7.
Browning is now making a 300 Win Mag with a tighter twist barrel.
Really?
Yeah. I heard that somewhere.
In their Hell's Canyon lineup?
I don't know which exact model it was, but I heard that Browning was going to come out with the next bolt.
Okay.
And in 300 Win Mag and come out with a 1 in 8 or a 1 in 9 twist barrel.
Ooh, I would be very interested to see
when
that.
I go for a 30 caliber upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aside from that plastic rotary magazine, I would like a next bolt. I got to figure out a way to get rid of that. Anyway, so the 7mm Remington Magnum has been around since the 60s, and the traditional bullet weight is a 160 grain bullet. The 708, it's the same caliber, it's the same bore diameter, .284, and it sits in between the 6.5 and the 30.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's a great middle ground. You've still got plenty of punch, close to what a 30 caliber has. But you've got a whole lot more punch than a 6.5 does.
Oh, yeah.
By a long
shot, yeah.
And like I said, that 160 grain bullet works awesome. You can get that in partitions. You can also get 140s as well.
Yeah.
150s are pretty common nowadays. That's kind of a middle of the ground load.
Yeah. Which if you have a Tikka, the 140 is going to be more what you're going for.
Yeah. So I've shot a boatload of different factory loads through my 7mm, and with 3-shot groups, I've only ever fired 2 out of probably 10 factory loads through it that haven't shot well under an inch at 100 yards with a 3-shot group.
Yeah.
With 5-shot groups, you know, I'll get an inch or maybe a touch more.
Yeah.
But with 3-shot groups, it's definitely well under that inch mark. So it shoots great for a factory rifle with factory ammo. It's awesome. Like I said, I've killed an absolute pile of animals with it.
Yeah.
And I still haven't shot a bear with it. It's just always been that I've taken something bigger with it with me on bear hunts just because. Not that it couldn't do it, because it absolutely could.
Yeah.
And I will at some point, maybe even this year. I don't know yet. The nice part about the 7mm Remington Magnum is that you get about 30% less recoil than a 300 Win Mag does.
Right, yeah.
And you're getting equal to, and in some instances, greater than ballistic performance than a 300 Win Mag does. because those 284 bullets are generally more aerodynamic than a comparably weighted 30 caliber option.
Yep.
So
your natural BC is going to be a lot higher.
A 160 grain Nosler AccuBond is comparable to like a 180 grain Nosler AccuBond out of a 30 caliber. And that 160 is going to shoot flatter and probably be able to get out there a little bit farther. Now, it's not going to have quite the punch that a 30 caliber does, being 20 grains lighter, but having a 284 with a heavier bullet has better sectional density than a 30 caliber bullet does. Again, of contemporary weight grain.
Yep.
Now, if you get really fancy with it, you can load up like a 175 grain bullet, which I need to get my hands on some 175 grain Nosler partitions. That would be a smoker.
Dude, I can't even imagine.
That would be a smoker load for like moose and grizzly bears. That'd be phenomenal. Again, you're not going to get that 500-600 yard performance, but for a sub 400 yard cartridge load, that would be absolute dynamite.
Well, and and it kind of gets into applying it for what you're trying to take out and do. Are you a person who wants to shoot a caribou at 650 yards, or are you going to look at that because you might not realize how far that is in your head when you're thinking about it?
Yeah.
And you see that caribou at 650 yards and think, no way, man.
Well, I've told this story before, but my longest kill shot to date, and probably ever, because I don't have any desire to do it again, was with my 7mm.
Yeah.
And I shot a nice bull caribou at a quite long distance. And I don't think I ever said the range on the podcast before. Yeah.
No.
I don't think I said it.
I think I know what it is, but it's not. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. It was well past what I would probably ever shoot at again.
Yep.
And it did work. Now, I wasn't shooting the right bullet for the job. I was shooting a mono metal, and it was approaching that minimum expansion velocity.
Yeah.
And it didn't open up like I would like it to by any means. It did kill it, and I did hit it multiple times, all in the boiler room. I mean, all in the ribs and through the vitals, but it didn't open up enough to cause enough damage right away to kill it as quickly as I would like to.
You were shooting a TSX?
I was shooting a 150 grain TTSX.
TTSX, right.
Yeah.
And you should have been shooting an LRX.
Either an LRX or I should have been shooting my old faithful 160 grain Nosler AccuBond.
Right.
That is a softer lead core bullet.
Probably my favorite load that I've ever shot anything with out of that particular rifle.
Okay.
Yeah.
That 160 grain Nosler AccuBond, it shoots. I mean, number one, it shoots bullet hole to bullet hole.
Yeah.
At 100 yards. It's just stupidly accurate.
And that's such a good feeling. When you see that clover leaf, and you're sitting,
it's ridiculous.
Or even less than a clover leaf.
And that's with the Nosler trophy grade AccuBond load.
Factory ammo.
And that's 3,000 feet per second.
Yep.
And my goodness, that is a great load. I've shot deer with it. I've shot caribou.
Yeah.
And then I've also shot the 162 grain Hornady ELDX. I've killed one or two caribou with that load, and then I've also killed some black-tailed deer with a bunch of different bullets as well. This last year, I shot all three of my black-tailed deer with a 150 grain Hornady CX, which is their latest rendition of a mono metal bullet. And like I said, as long as you're inside that 2,000 feet per second impact velocity, you're perfectly fine with that. But I would say, if I could only have one bullet to do it all in that 7mm, it'd be that 160 grain Nosler AccuBond. It does so well.
Yep, they expand fast, but they hold together, and they're just phenomenal.
And that 7 mag, like I said, with less recoil than a 300, you're still getting really a lot better performance than like a 30-06 for do-it-all applications. I wouldn't hesitate with 175 grain Nosler partition to shoot a brown bear with it. Like I said, all these calibers will kill, all these cartridges will kill a big brown bear or a big bull moose. You just have to be smart about your shot selection.
Right.
And obviously assuming that you have a capable bullet for the job.
Right.
That being said, if you are responsible and put the bullet in the exact right spot, it's a dead animal.
As you should.
It's a dead animal.
And the thing with the 7mm, and that's kind of my progression of just my calibers so far that I've gone through is, that's what I upgraded to when I jumped up from the .6.
Yeah.
As I jumped straight into the 7mm.
Yeah, me too.
And, I currently shoot 300 Win Mag, and that was because I was just in the market for another gun, and I'm as ADHD with my, guns as I am with everything else in my life. And, but honestly, when you look at them side by side, and you're looking at, it is really a neck and neck race.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a point, and my argument would be for up close, the 300 Win Mag wins.
Yeah.
And just
100%.
arguably because it's a heavier, wider bullet.
Yep. And that frontal diameter has a lot to do with its killing effectiveness at close ranges.
But, there's a point, around like that 400 or 500 yard mark where that 7mm pulls away, man.
Absolutely.
It does because it's got the higher natural BC. It's just more aerodynamic. It carries that weight and that velocity and that, it goes farther. And, so honestly, I mean, if you're looking between those two, you're kind of just splitting hairs, honestly, And that's kind of what I was getting to with a lot of these Magnums. When you start getting into, you said we're not going to talk about all of them because obviously we don't have time. But when you're looking at these, let's say the 300 Win Mag versus the 300 Weatherby Mag, or
300 short mag,
300 short mag. You are literally just splitting hairs. On anything. Any of these Magnum cartridges will give you plenty of effective.
Absolutely.
Killing power out to far beyond what you probably should be shooting animals at. And, they all have a distinct advantage over the older style kind of sub-Magnum cartridges. But that being said, I don't know. The thing that I love about these Magnum cartridges is that with the smaller bullets and with that less recoil, you can still get the performance of some of those bigger cartridges that we have spoken to. Is a wider bullet better for some of these situations where you're out chasing dangerous game? Absolutely. But in a rifle that has 25 foot-pounds of recoil versus
35 or
35 or in some cases with the Weatherbys, up in the 40s. That's a huge difference, and that makes it a lot more usable for the average person. And so I think that's why we talk about them a lot on this show. That's why we kind of push those for our uses, is they're more universal.
Everybody knows that one of the most important pieces of a hunter's kit is their knife. Whether you're looking for a fleshing blade, a skinning blade, or just a quality, multi-purpose knife for the backcountry, Yukon River Knives has what you need. They offer blades such as the Hunter, Small Game, and the Sendero Bush Knife. Yukon River Knives is based in Texas and has a unique mission goal in that a percentage of all knife sales go to support a missionary in Alaska. Now, Dalton, you've experienced with these knives in the field. Talk to us about that.
As a matter of fact, I have used a few of their knives and watched my good friend Remy use them for years with great results. They have a micarta handle that doesn't get slippery when it gets wet, and they have phenomenal edge retention for long skinning jobs. Go check out our web link on thenorthernhunter.com, and that'll take you directly to Yukon River Knives website to see their full selection and order your knives for your next hunt with the discount code TheNorthernHunter at checkout. And remember, nothing replaces a quality hunting knife.
Now, I was going to get back to what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
The 280 Ackley.
Yeah.
It was brought to Sammy for acceptance by Nosler. And I want to say 2008 was when that was brought in. And somebody can look that up.
Of all the rounds we've talked
verify
about today that your general Joe Schmo hunter maybe hasn't heard of, it's going to be this one. I say of all the ones we've mentioned today,
I would say that's the 260 Remington.
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah.
The 280 Ackley has really caught on a lot in recent years because of one major reason. It's a very efficient cartridge.
Okay.
It is just below what a 7mm Remington Magnum is as a 7mm cartridge. It is a I don't think it's a Magnum case, and so you can fit more in the magazine of a rifle than you can with a 7 Rem Mag.
What does it have a parent case, or do you know?
Let me look that up and double check what the parent case is.
Yeah, if it has a parent case,
I think I already know, but I want to make sure.
Well, can you guess, and then we can find out if you're right?
No, because I don't want to be wrong. Let's see here.
He's just wrong so often. He wants to avoid that as much as he can.
So it was originally the 280 Remington, which was based off the 30-06 Springfield.
The 280.
So
Remington,
it is a child of the 30-06. Essentially.
So could you?
Right.
But
so
a little bit of history.
Could you neck down the 30-06?
Explain Ackley improved.
So Ackley improvement is something you can do to many, many, many cartridges. What it is there's a gentleman. I don't remember off the top of my head his first name, but his last name is Ackley.
Yeah.
And it's golly, you're putting me on the spot. I used to know all of this. It's a improvement of basically what they do. When you look at those older cartridges, you'll realize that a lot of them have the kind of slimmed down body contour.
Right.
They start off wide down by the base, and they end up, when you get to the shoulder, it's a tapered body.
Right.
What the Ackley did is it widened that, so it became a straight. It straightened it out on the sides, and the shoulders became sharper.
Okay.
I'll look up the exact degree of the
shoulders
there because it's standard. And so what you do is you're able to get reams for these Ackley versions, whether you want, and you can Ackley improve, like I said, many, many cartridges.
You can Ackley improve a 270. You can Ackley improve a 30-06.
Right.
30,
All
30.
it does, you can basically just fire form the brass.
Right. And that's what I was getting at. So you get that reamer, and you can order these, and you bring that to a gunsmith, and he can take your barrel off, and he can ream out the chamber to an Ackley improved chamber. And then you just take any old, whether it's a 30-06, a 270, anything like that, and you fire form that brass. Fire forming, for those that don't know, is basically you take the original cartridge, you shove it into this chamber, which now has a different shape. And when you fire that cartridge off, the heat, obviously kind of softens the metal, but the expansion there from the powder going off will then force that brass out, and it will then, when you rack the bolt back and you take that case out, it is then changed in shape.
Okay, so I imagine you'd neck that down first for a 280 Ackley off a 30-06. You'd neck it down to 280.
Well, no, you don't make it out of 30-06. 280 is based off the 280 Remington.
Yeah.
So what they did here.
So you would take 280 Remington ammo.
What they did here is the 280.
Well, that was my question, because you said the 280 Remington is based off the 30-06.
No. Yeah, the 280 Remington is based off the 30-06. The 280 Ackley improved is based off the 280 Remington. So you would take 280 Remington. Now you don't have to do that anymore because the 280 Ackley is a SAMI spec approved.
And it was 2007. I looked it up.
And
so, just out of curiosity, my question was: is the 280 Remington a necked down 30-06? Is that all it is?
No, they did a lot more to it than that.
Okay.
Well, any of these cases, when they say it's a parent case, that doesn't mean they just resize the neck.
Well, but there are a lot of cartridge that all you have to do is neck it down.
That is very true.
And so that was my question, because I'm not
a lot
of
times you have to trim it, or
Yeah,
right.
In a lot of cases, they'll shorten it up or something like that if they need to. But But
that was just a curiosity question on that.
The process of fire forming is for all of the other versions of Ackley improvement.
Okay.
The 280 is now a factory load that you can buy.
So Nosler presented the 280 Ackley to SAMI in 2007 for acceptance as a factory loaded cartridge, right? They came up with a load standard and data for it, and they said, we want to be able to make ammo for it. And really, it hasn't been all that popular until more recently.
Yeah.
I know Joseph Von Benedict on the Backcountry Hunting podcast talks about the 280 a lot. He calls it his favorite backcountry hunting cartridge for Western hunting. He loves it. And like I said, it's just below what you can get with factory ammo, apples to apples in weight grains, what you'll get out of a 7 Rem Mag.
Yeah.
And you're getting it with a lot less recoil and with less powder, so it's more efficient, and you can fit more rounds in your magazine than a 7 Rem Mag. So for me personally, I think it belongs in that Magnum category rather than
it is an
closer.
altered case.
Yeah.
So I would agree with you on that.
But It's also a great option. I have had a couple of clients. Last year, I had a client shoot a Dall sheep with a 280 Ackley, and I also had a client shoot a caribou at, 350, I think, and 140 grain Accubons on the caribou, one shot, and just tatered it. I mean, I think it died from when its chin hit the ground. Yeah, I don't know. I use that word a lot. Oh, you tatered him. Yeah. Anyway, but that's a very effective round.
Yeah.
And with a 140, again, you flatten it right out, you speed it up. It's a great cartridge. But
yeah, no, that really is.
That'd be an awesome sheep hunting round, caribou. I mean, heck, you shoot moose with it with a 160.
All day long.
Shoot a partition out of it, or like a Barnes.
Yeah.
Now, ammo availability, I don't think anybody loads it outside of Nosler and Federal.
No, I don't know.
So you're going to be a little more limited. Maybe Hornady makes a 280 Ackley load.
They might. I think as it grows in popularity, there's going to be more. But
again, it's this whole market of efficiency that we're coming back to. And the more efficient cartridges are winning over the super magnums like the Weatherbys and the Ultra Mags that are just, and even the Noslers for that matter, that use so much powder. Once you get to that level of speed, you're using exponentially more powder for very minimal increases in velocity. Once you get up over 3,200 feet per second, to get another 100 feet per second is an astronomically higher powder charge.
And I was going to
not to mention the price you pay in recoil.
Well, yeah. And I was going to say a word of warning about those, actually, for a lot of people. There are those people that just love their Remington Ultra Mags and
absolutely,
and their big Weatherbys, the 3378.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it at all. The problem you're going to run into, though, is one, and this will kind of lead into another part of this I wanted to touch on. But, once you reach a certain level of performance, anything more than that is just kind of unnecessary.
Yeah.
You're going to get this Remington Ultra Mag, I'll just use the 300 Remington Ultra Mag or the 300 Rum as they call it.
Yeah. Affectionately.
That thing holds so much powder that in majority of let's say you for some reason ended up with one that was a 24-inch barrel, which I think most of them come in 26. But even with that, half the time, you can't even burn that powder by the time it hits to the end of the barrel. You're going to see a fireball come out of the end of it because there's still powder. Right. Yeah. And with that, one, like I just said, once you hit a certain number in whether it be your long range ability or your energy margins or, your expansion velocities, going further than that is just one, completely unnecessary. But two, you're going to be wearing out your barrels a lot faster. These things
because of that extreme heat.
The extreme heat
at the beginning of the barrel, and just outside the chamber.
Yeah,
and that steel expands and contracts and expands and contracts. And if I'm sure you're going to lead into this, but if you shoot too much too fast, then what happens?
Well, and that's the thing; it's going to erode that metal away, that the speed of that bullet going down there too, and you'll see that even with, the smaller ones, the 22 250s will burn out barrels pretty quick too, but the other thing with that too, where you really have to be careful is that these Ultra Magnums can, and sometimes do, shoot faster than what some bullets are actually warranted to be shot at. You look at a Nosler Accubon, they guarantee performance on that bullet, from 1,800 feet per second, which is your minimum. A lot of people don't think about it, but there is a maximum, and I believe it's 3,200 feet per second is the maximum for that one.
Yes.
And when you're shooting, let's say a 180 grain out of a 3378 Weatherby, you are exceeding that.
Yeah.
You're going to be shooting at, probably dancing, I would imagine, in the 33 to 3,400 feet per second range, and so if you want to shoot one of those big ones and you're shooting a very, very heavy bullet, that might be one thing. You can slow it down a little bit.
Tame that velocity a little bit,
at that point, maybe you're shooting a heavier bullet at the speed that you would normally shoot a lighter bullet and getting maybe more energy or something for like a closer range encounter.
Right.
But if you're planning on shooting that same style projectile, that same weight projectile, but just faster, you're going to be doing more damage to the to the gun than necessary. The added performance isn't really going to help you.
Yeah.
And you're going to be potentially smacking, you know, a 300 Rem could be great out at 700-800 yards. What happens if a moose steps out at 80?
Yeah.
You know,
you're going to kill it.
You're going to kill it with shrapnel, you know, when that bullet blows up.
The bullet's going to disintegrate.
You know, it's going to completely, it's not going to hold together the way it's designed to do.
Even if you're shooting a monometal over 3,000 feet a second, it's hard to get those monometals to not just shed petals.
Yeah, it'll expand and those petals will just rip off.
Yeah.
And, you know, so be careful when you're looking at those too, you know, and there's a very important part, you know, when you're looking at all these, you know, we've talked about a ton of different calibers. Or cartridges, sorry, across a vast span of performance. Right. You know, understanding that performance and understanding what your needs are for your particular application is everything.
Yeah.
You know, that is the difference between somebody who might think he needs the 300 Rem to kill a moose versus the guy that knows he can do it with a 270.
Right.
You know, and understanding that's why we kind of harp on this show is, you know, to do your research, to look into these things, to make sure you know what your performance is, because, you know, the 300 Rem does have certain advantages over the 270, but is it the only way to go? No. And, you know, that guy with the 270 is going to shoot that same barrel for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
You know,
he's going to get 3 or 4 or 5,000 rounds out of his gun, whereas you're going to get 800 to 1,200.
But if you're shooting a 300 Rem, you're hunting moose. Basically,
no.
Well, not necessarily, but it's a lot more specific caliber for big, large game that you just want knockdown power. Versus a 270, you have in my opinion, I have a lot more ethical variety with a 270 than I do with a 300 Rem.
Well, another thing is think about the meat damage that you get with that much velocity. We touched on that in the last episode about shooting a 375 at deer. And how that varies from a higher velocity cartridge. Yeah. When you step up anything over 3,000 feet per second, the meat damage is substantial.
You will jello that thing from nose to tail.
Right. Well,
if you hit a quarter with a over 3,000 feet per second at the muzzle round, you're going to lose the majority of that quarter.
Yeah.
Right.
Unless your impact velocity is way out there where that bullet has had time to slow down substantially.
Right. Yeah. You're shooting at range or like we said, you're shooting a heavy bullet, you know, that's slowed down quite a bit.
That's why my personal favorites in the Magnum caliber offerings, Magnum cartridge offerings, for me personally, for all around hunting in Alaska, I would recommend either the 7 Rem Mag or the 300 Win Mag.
Yeah.
Those are your bread and butter. If you don't want a true Magnum, then you go with an 0.6 or a 270.
Yeah.
Those are probably my top 4 choices for something that's not a 375.
Yep.
And honestly, it's probably the most realistic option for most people.
Yeah.
They're substantially cheaper to get ammo for, to get components for to reload. They don't use as much powder. They're a lot less recoil. They're easier to shoot. And that means that you're going to shoot them better.
Right.
You're going to be able to practice more with them, which is going to make you more familiar with your gun, which is how you are able to survive a bear encounter.
Yeah.
Right.
If you have a situation like that, you know that 270 inside out, upside down, and backwards.
Yeah.
And if a grizzly bear charges you while you're on a moose hunt, it's going to be second nature. It's an extension of your arms to just pull that gun up to your shoulder and take a shot.
Yeah.
That's why I love that 4570.
And if you know your rifle and you know where where that first shot's going to go on the charge, you will stop an interior grizzly with a 270 or with an 0.6 or a 7 Rem Mag or a 300 Win Mag.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's why I have confidence carrying a 7 Rem Mag anywhere in the interior that I want.
Yep.
Or a 300 Win Mag. And I have both, but you know, I honestly, I've reached for my 7 Mag so many more times than I have my 300, and it's because I've got so much time with it in the field, and I've shot so much stuff with it. I know that gun, and I know what's going to happen when I touch that trigger.
Well, and if you're in the market for a hunting rifle, you know, a lot of ranges, I don't think that any of them do it here in Fairbanks, but I know in other places that I've been, there's ranges where you can go rent guns or maybe find a buddy that has one that you want. And like, if you are trying to shoot a rifle for hunting that you can only get 3 rounds off and you're already rubbing your shoulder.
Yeah.
You're going to develop a flinch.
Well, and
you're going to be...
That's another thing too, is on my 7 Rem Mag, I put on that Seekins Precision side baffle, 4-port side baffle muzzle brake on it last year, just before we went down to Southeast. And that took an already easy to shoot rifle and turned it into a 223 to shoot.
Yeah.
I can stay on target in the scope at 100 yards at the rifle range.
Yep.
Just checking my zero at 18 power in my rifle scope.
Yeah.
And I don't come off target. Shooting off a bipod.
Yeah.
I'm not in a lead sled.
Yeah.
And with a muzzle brake, I'm on target at 100 yards at 18 power with a full-blown Magnum cartridge shooting a 160 grain bullet.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yep.
Very, very little recoil. Obviously, it's really, really loud. It's like someone sets off a hand.
It's a give and take.
But yeah, like you said, you sacrifice some things to get other things.
Yeah, and I shoot muzzle brakes on pretty much everything I have. That's
the only gun that I have a brake on right now. Ironically enough.
Well, and the reason I do that is exactly that.
I like
to
be able to spot
see
my
your
impacts.
impact. Yeah, it's a huge advantage.
When I shot that pair of bucks together in Southeast this last December, at 200 yards, I had the scope on about 5 power.
Yeah,
and when I shot both them deer, I watched the bullets hit both of them.
Yep.
It's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
And that is so important, especially for a solo hunter. If you can get that target acquisition and stay on target and spot your own impacts.
Yeah. That's huge.
That is priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. But so before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one that we had here, which is bullet selection recommendations for these I would say specifically for the non-magnums. I think we covered the magnums and what we recommend for those in other episodes and things like that. But if you're shooting let's say a 270 or a 30-06, the specific disadvantage you're at compared to these magnums is you're at a slower rate of speed. You're going to be hitting with less energy, and you kind of need to compensate for that a little bit. The way I would say my recommendations aren't going to be as different as I normally would, because I still recommend those very tough bullets.
Yeah.
But you have a little bit more leeway there, because they're not going quite so fast, because they're not going, at these magnum speeds.
They're not going to be as stressed on impact.
Yeah. Right. And so, I don't really often recommend regular old cup and core bullets. But I would say if that's what you're able to find in these smaller or slower cartridges, I would say as long as you get a quality one, you're good to go. Yeah. If you're looking at a let's just say a Sierra Game King, that's one I actually do like. It's probably my favorite traditional cup and core bullet that's non-bonded, because that jacket, they did a really good job of thickening that jacket up.
Yeah.
And so your expansion is a lot more controlled than it would be on a thinner jacket one like an ELDX.
Yeah.
The ELDX is
very frangible.
Very frangible. They're kind of a, they work. Yeah. Absolutely. But it's kind of a gamble on whether it's going to, stick together or if it's going to fall apart. With the Sierra Game Kings, you're going to have a lot more consistency, I would say.
I have several boxes that I picked up a few years ago of the Sierra. I think they're called Game Changers, and they're green tipped. They're 150s.
Okay.
No, they're tipped Game Kings. That's what they are.
I was going to say,
I think TGKs.
Okay.
And I for some reason Game Changer came to mind. But that's a 150 grain round, and I have those in the 7 Rem Mag. And they shot very, very well. I haven't ever killed anything with them.
Yep. But. And when you're 2,800 feet or less, and you're going to be even less than that when you actually impact. That's muzzle velocity.
Yeah.
You're not going to be stressing those bullets out quite to the extent like a 300 Rem Mag would or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it is important maybe not for the dangerous game realm, but for, if you're going after moose or caribou or something like that, if you're shooting a round that has a little bit less velocity and a little bit less energy, it's important to shoot a bullet that compensates for that. Yeah. You get very good expansion. You definitely, and again, that's where I said that my recommendations aren't going to vary that much, because you still need a tough bullet that's going to hold together. Regardless of what you're shooting it out of, that's the most important thing, because that's the only way you're going to kill that animal.
My personal take on something that's not a Magnum, like an .6 or a 270 or something in that realm, would be a Nosler partition.
Yeah.
60%.
Phenomenal bullet for that.
60% weight retention, but that front lead core expands immediately.
Yes.
And you get that high shock value, if you will, that we always talk about. You get that massive imparting of energy.
Yep.
And you still have the rear half of that bullet that you're going to get that 60% from that H jacket back of that rear lead core that's going to stay together and keep on penetrating where it needs to go. Yep. That's my favorite style bullet for a non-Magnum. And even for a lot of the Magnums, that's a great hybrid option, to get really, really good expansion, but to also have adequate weight retention guaranteed to get good penetration.
Right. Well, and and beyond that, a bullet like that, the thing is, when you're shooting these sub-Magnum cartridges, you don't really need those high BC rounds, because that's not where your target is.
Right.
You're gonna be, sub 400.
Yeah.
In almost every case.
Yeah.
And so you don't really need to stress about the BC so much.
No.
And so a Nosler partition, just because it has a lower BC than, say, some of these other bullets, that's not going to change your game.
No.
You're still going to be effective out to those ranges.
Yeah.
And all day long. And that's true of any of these, whether it's the 270 or, the 260, 6.5s, things like that.
Yeah. When you step up into the Magnum cartridges that we just talked about, like the 7 mag and the 300 Win Mag and everything else above that, that's where having a much tougher bullet becomes more important because of that increased velocity.
Right.
That's a lot more stress on that bullet.
Yep.
That's where I would say you need to start with a Nosler partition or a Nosler Accubon and go up from there. And even into a monometal if you're going to shoot like a big brown bear or a moose with it.
Yeah.
Something that will hold together no matter what, even if you encounter bone.
Yeah. And a lot of that is because, with that added velocity of those Magnum rounds, you're going to get that better wound cavity.
Absolutely.
Because there's just more of a smack.
It's a lot more trauma going on with that much more velocity.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, well, we've been going on for quite a while, gentlemen.
We have been.
Yes.
I just looked at the clock.
You think anybody's still listening?
I hope so.
I have one more thing to add.
Yeah.
No matter what gun you choose to hunt in Alaska, I would kindly ask of you to equip your hunting rifle of choice for Alaska with a Stealthy Hunter rifle cover and protect your Alaska hiking cheeks with Alaskan quality glassing pad.
Yeah.
Also from Stealthy Hunter.
We got an email this past week, guy named James. Did you beat me? Did I beat you to it?
No, I was going to do that as an intro to the next one.
Well, I beat you to it. Too late. Too late.
2.5 hours in.
He goes, well, use it as intro to the next one too. If people are sticking around this long, they're not going to care.
Okay, sure. Whatever.
He says, he goes, when I first saw the Stealthy Hunter pad gun cover, I said to myself, there's no way I would use either one of them. 2 years later, my wife bought them for me as some kind of a promo gift. And needless to say, I won't go out without them now. And he says, what gear do you guys use now that you thought you would never have a use for later? And
let's
we don't have to get into
next
that.
one.
Yeah, that's why I was going to use it as an intro.
Right. We can do that later. But what I was going to say, since we're talking about the Stealthy Hunter cover, rifle cover, and shooting rest pad.
Classic pad. Yeah.
It's
late. It's late.
It is late. I thought the exact same thing when I first saw him come out with those. It's like, man, that just doesn't look
usable.
Yeah,
I would agree.
And now that I have one, it's amazing what I love.
It goes everywhere with me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's not cumbersome by any stretch.
No,
it just
lightweight.
It slides. Just slides right out there without and all your other gear, and it's super handy.
Right. Very functional piece. So go over to Stealthy Hunter's website. and shop the rifle covers and the glassing pads and also all of the nutritional supplements. I've been enjoying their bone broth and also their turmeric supplements and also their probiotic for gut health.
How's that turmeric working for you? Helping you?
Very well.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll have to discuss that.
We will. Okay.
But it is good.
Yeah, right on.
If you go over there and shop all of that stuff from Stealthy Hunter, from Ryan Lampers, we would appreciate it if at checkout you would use the discount code for the podcast at The Northern Hunter at checkout. And no space, no caps.
Yep.
And that'll help us out on the show a lot and also get you a little bit of a discount there as well.
So, absolutely.
There will be a link and the promo code will be in the description of this episode and of every episode.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. We hope you enjoyed this half as much as we did.
Yeah. And if you did, definitely subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to it. Give us a rating, as best as you can. And,
yes, please.
Write us in. Absolutely write us into the show. You can get us in contact with us at the website, thenorthernhunter.com. I almost said www.
But if you have ideas for future show options as well,
if you go to the website there's a contact button. You'll get it right to our email. If you're in your email already, it's info@thenorthernhunter.com. And we love hearing from you guys. We love the ideas for new shows. It's one thing that helps us, understand what you guys are wanting to find out. So, it's just kind of how this one got brought about. So, but check out the website, check out our socials. You can contact us there too. If you search at The Northern Hunter on Instagram or Facebook, you'll find us there. And I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.